Yes, y'all. It's been a while, but we're back this week. Um, Unfortunately, my from doing the show. Funeral services will be next Saturday, so we won't be live next Saturday, but I'll be traveling. I'll be at the funeral, and we'll see about the week after. But I wanted to, come by and let everyone know what was going on with me and to explain the absence the past 2 or so weeks. If you're out there listening, can you drop a one for me if you can hear my voice? I just want to make sure I'm being broadcasted. I see a lot of slaughter for the RBG colors up in the chat. So if you can hear me, just drop a one for me. Arthur's just dropped a one. He said the actual word one. I appreciate that. So again, I haven't been here because of the passing of my father, but you know, uh, we'll talk about that more a little bit later. What I want to do now is tell you guys what we have in store tonight. Tonight we're gonna try to answer the question: is colonizing in the DNA? Shout out to the matron who's in the chat. Make sure you guys are supporting the matron as well in her live streams. So is colonizing in the DNA? We're going to talk about the decolonizing of the Black world, the Martinique edition. We're going to talk about how AI is taking over. This one is for Sister Raw. We're going to ask the question, can Pan-Africanism coexist with patriotism? That's an interesting question. And last, we're going to discuss Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, and a lot of the disrespect he gets today due to pretendians, but we're going to talk about some counter evidence, some claims of his. So those are the conversations those are the conversations we plan to have tonight. Thank you, After, for the condolences. Those are the conversations we plan to have. I want to keep this a nice and tight episode, so we're going to end at 11 or shortly thereafter, maybe even before. What we're going to do now is start the show officially, and on the other side, I'll drop Shoot the Breeze, topic number one, as well as introduce any and all of the panelists tonight. So, guys, do stay tuned. But in the meantime, smash the like button for me. Share the show. Invite a friend. I'm going to be working on that the services when I come back. So, but in the meantime, do me that favor. Share the show to your social media and invite.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAC Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Koku. Just want to remind you guys before we get the show rolling that this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. There are other shows on the network you are invited to tune into.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the Revolutionary Matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. I see Kofi the Black Critic that I was cutting out. I don't know if you guys are hearing that as well. It's possible. If it continues, I'll just have to switch up my setup. Shout out to Afro Native World who's out there in the chat as well. Today was a hell of a day. I had a steam leak that my wall is toe open, so you might hear some noise. I don't know if my connection's good, so it's just been a hell of a time. But with that said, man, let me introduce my panelists who are with me so far tonight. I'll be Black Steel. Black Steel, how are you this week?
Doing great, Coco. How about yourself, man? Sorry to hear about what's going on. That's crazy.
Yeah. I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. Oh, you're talking about the house. Yeah, the house is one thing. Roof is toe open. Walls, but I'm hanging in there, man. I do appreciate you being here, though. With that said, let me shout out Buana this week. Buana, how are you?
Coco, I'm good, bro. I'm good. Yeah, you know what it is. You know what it is. I'm probably gonna come by to the funeral on next week Saturday. But condolences again. And that's all I could say, man. It's something you have to work through, and I understand because I've been there. So my condolences again.
Yes, sir. Yeah, Buana lost his dad not too long ago too. I appreciate that, Buana. Thanks to you and Brother Bakari and everyone who reached out to me. I know Trigger Happy posted a message, so appreciate all you guys for checking in and things of that nature. Trigger's in the chat saying peace, and condolences again. I appreciate that, Trigger Happy. All right, guys, let's just get right into it, man. Without further ado, Shoot the Breeze. Topic number 1 is colonizing in the DNA. This is a story that I saw maybe 3 weeks ago. But of course, we weren't here to discuss it. But I'm going to bring it now. You guys probably have seen it since then as well. Make sure you guys can see my screen. Yes, you can. Shout out to Kofi and Cheryl. Sister Cheryl giving their condolences as well. I appreciate that, guys. So, should we start with number 1? Is colonizing in the DNA. This takes us to a tweet from Kevin Blue. I've been indicted for planning a violent takeover of a Haitian island. Federal investigators say they spent almost an entire year training, studying Haitian Creole, and mapping out a detailed plan to travel to Gonave Island and carry out a massacre. Let's watch the story. This is wild stuff. Let's watch the story.
Prosecutors say the suspects didn't plan to go it alone. Prosecutors say the suspects didn't plan to go it alone. In fact, the feds say they plan to recruit people who are homeless in Washington, D.C. to serve on their, quote, expeditionary force and take over a small Haitian island. The grand jury indictment handed up today charges 21-year-old Gavin Weisenberg from Allen and 20-year-old Tanner Thomas from Argyle with conspiracy to murder, maim, or kidnap in a foreign country, as well as a charge of production of child pornography. Record Joe Weisenberg was booked into the Collin County Jail in July. Prosecutors say he was in the U.S. Air Force at the time. The place they are accused of plotting to invade is called Gonav Island. It is part of the Republic of Haiti. It's not small. In fact, that island has about 87,000 residents. Prosecutors say Weisenberg and Thomas plan to lead that expeditionary force by sailboats to the island, murder the men, take control of the island, and then turn the women into sex slaves, according to prosecutors. The feds say the plan dates back to August of last year. They say Weisenberg enrolled in a Rockwall Fire Academy to learn command and control protocols, but flunked out in February. They say he then traveled to Thailand to learn how to sail, but didn't enroll in the school due to the cost. The feds say Thomas, meanwhile, enlisted in the Air Force in January and in March, changed his station assignment from Germany to Maryland to better coordinate the invasion and recruit the homeless population in D.C.
I stopped kind of abruptly. I didn't expect that. Let me see if there was more. I don't remember now.
No problem.
But someone here says, Malayla says, but I thought black people were thugs and menaces to society. Big E says, really? How did they think this was going to work out for them? I know some Haitians, let me tell you, they need to be thanking their lucky stars that the cops got to them first. So
prosecutors say the suspects didn't plan to go it alone. In fact, the feds say they
annoying. So a couple of people kind of understand the Haitian people and know that wasn't going to work too well for them. So this is a very interesting story in 2025. Two white boys thought they could really go and invade this island, which I never heard of, by the way. I'm not familiar with that island, interestingly enough. That has 80,000 plus people on it, and they thought they was going to take it over. Black Seal, what are your thoughts on that story?
Well, all I gotta say is white people gonna white people to the end of time, right? So this is kind of like a jokey thing. It was actually talked about in some, the racist online chat rooms that they have. This is just something that white people want, again, first of all, they probably looked at the island online. They really thought they could go to Haiti. But what got me the most is their plan to kill off all the men and use the women and children as sex slaves. And they got these two guys for child pornography. I wonder what the color of the children they were. These sick people plan to go to the island, not for resources, but to turn into their own personal harem, right? And that is some sick thinking. But overall, it's how can I say this, man? Let me answer the question: is colonizing the DNA, right? I don't know if I believe that it's in their DNA, right? I would say, again, I think European culture, it produces this type of thing, and many of them long to go back to the days of, landing on some island with some savages and killing off all the men, and this is what they fantasize about. They want to return to that time. I don't know if I believe it's in their DNA, though. I don't know if it's something that they're born with. I believe the truth is centered in their culture, right? I think that because they've grown up in a culture that produces these type of psychopaths, right? That's more than what it is. I think, I personally do, there's, be convinced. I mean, I don't know. Is there show me the gene for that's the same thing people say about black people, right? That we're genetically predisposed to crime, right? I mean, I don't know, there's no proof that you can really show me, in their DNA. You got some DNA. I'm not saying their behavior is right. I'm just saying that I don't think it's genetic. I think it's done by their culture. That's what I think more than anything. But the result is still the same. But no, it is psychopathic person who's doing this, but I just don't think that it would just replicate itself in the genes. I don't know. How could you find that? But anyways, it's just ridiculous that these two people really plan to do this. I'm pretty sure eventually they would have ended up dead or in a shallow grave somewhere at the island. But it's just a shame, really. But also too, many of the people they were recruiting were in the military, and the U.S. military is a hotbed for white nationalism, white racism. So that's all I got to say about that, Coco. Thank you.
Interesting. Black Steel doesn't think it's in the DNA. I mean, Black Steel is correct. You can't find the gene for it, but not every trait is in a gene. That's one thing we got to understand. Which is why I think trigger happy means when he says it's more so epigenetic, meaning that it's which can mean that it's the environment playing on something in the genetics. So, but I think the idea of it being in the DNA is kind of tongue in cheek anyway. It definitely is in the culture, and it's in the. I would say it's in the every fiber of their being type thing. But let me hear what Buana has to say. Buana, what say you?
No, I would say I wouldn't say it's in the DNA. I would say it's in the programming. I would say it's in the programming. I would say it's in the Netflix films. I would say it's in the history books that they've been taught from a very early age. All the cartoons telling them they're conquerors. You know, they almighty. They the Ubermen of history. Always the good guys. You know, and I think that's what is in. And once you fed off of that nonsense for a certain amount of time, it's going to produce a certain outcome. See, the act of what they did was audacious. It's an audacious act. I mean, it's far-fetched, but at least these guys they're big dreamers, just like their fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers who captured large. If you look at England itself, England is a very small island, but they used to say the sun will never set on the English Isle. This is how much territory they was able to capture with a small amount of people. And the question is, how did they do that? How did they do that? With audaciousness, with having far-fetched big dreams of themselves. They this puffed up reality, a sense of self. And they went out there and actually did the exact same things these guys are actually doing or try to do. I think that now they're going to find a completely different reality. See, I know these guys would have eventually ended up dead. And the media is all in a fray about these two guys who's going to try to commit an impossible act. But for me, this is like a sleight of hands. Why are we looking at Gonav, at these two guys in trying to rule over Haiti? You have the USS Gerald Ford right now in the Caribbean, swinging his big dick around in the Caribbean, trying to tell everybody, oh, we the big bosses in the block, and if you do anything, we're gonna bomb any boats, random boats, and kill you all people off just to send a message, rerun shit. And he's doing it in Venezuela right now, trying to establish regime change. So while we focusing on these two guys who is gonna attempt to commit an act, we have the USS Gerald Ford with the crazy man in office trying to do the exact same thing on a greater scale. The audaciousness of it, taking up democratically elected person out of Venezuela and replacing him because they won't conquer the whole of that territory. When you're imbued with this idea of white supremacy, these are the kinds of fanciful notions that you do. Never mind, we may be able to conquer lands, but the ability to maintain them lands is going to become impossible because as soon as you put your puppet regime in place, the people themselves are going to rebel against that. It's not going to last for so long. So you could swing your big dick around, but the eventuality is you're going to be deposed. But I mean, like I say, these guys are big dreamers. They've been imbued from day one, from since it was in kindergarten, that we are the Ubermen of history. We are the conquerors. We are the mighty heroes. Let's go conquer territory. Their grandfathers probably told them these kinds of ideas. When they're gonna meet a completely different reality when they set on the shores of Gonaïves. Because Gonaïves, the Haitians, they ain't forget the history either. So I say, you know, good luck. Good luck.
I will ask this question. Well, I have a question I'll ask. And I'll do it right after I read a couple of comments here. Sister Cheryl says Europeans' ancient history tells us they're used to living in environments that are harsh. They don't come from lands of plenty, so they develop these harsh behaviors. Is definitely epigenetic. Trigger Happy asks a question. Do they have anything to undo this? Talking about these white folks in general. Do they have anything to undo these kinds of behaviors? If you've been doing this for thousands of years, it's hard to stop. My question would be, because at first I was going to ask the question of, do we see examples of this amongst black folks, where black folks plotting and planning and taking it upon themselves to take over a region, in particular, say a white region, and kill all the men and blah, blah, blah. I don't think we do. But then we do have, and this might bother some people for me to say it, but we do have guys like Traore, who does wrestle power, stages a coup, wrestles power, and is doing what he's doing. Is that the same? Is that the equivalent? Is that black folks taking on this kind of idea of I'm going to impose my will and pull power? Is that a good equivalent? Boy, what say you?
Why you put that in my lap? Oh, put that in my lap. Let me think about it. Let me think about it for a minute. Go to Black Steel. Let me think about it for a minute.
Black Steel. Let's see.
No, I don't think that's the equivalent. I don't think so at all. Because these dudes is going over there to rape and pillage, right? When what you're already doing is trying to organize Africans to protect themselves, protect their rights, protect their resources. So yeah, no, I wouldn't say it's the equivalent at all, actually. You know? Yeah, just not when I definitely would not say it's the equivalent. I really think that, this is a foolhardy expedition. It just really says something about, the mindset of the people who would do this. They're recruiting homeless people in to Washington, D.C. to help them go on this expedition. This is really, truly a product of a depraved and sick culture.
So Black Steel, you're more of the thing that is just insanity that's being displayed here.
It is savagery, but it is also
no, sorry, insanity.
Oh, it is insanity to a certain degree. It's insane, but also there's a method to the madness, right? And the idea is that their culture produces this type of attitude. To think that in 2025, and I get a lot of it too went on their lack of knowledge. They didn't know anything about Haiti. They didn't know anything about their islands or anything else like that. But in their mind, they thought, "Oh, we can just roll up on this country. They're poor. All they do is kill each other. We could take this opportunity to do this." They came in with the knowledge that Africans are backwards, Asians are backwards, and they could just go on there and do that. So that's just my thoughts.
I would say that I would say to Black Steel, I would just remind him that the people who came to this side of the world, Christopher Columbus, these guys were at the bottom of those societies as well. In particular, even Australia. A lot of people who came to this side of the world to colonize this place initially, They wasn't homeless, but some of these guys was even prisoners. You know, so I mean, you rather live as a poor man and a destitute man in one place, or possibly live as a conqueror in another one. I don't know. And a lot of these homeless people on the streets of a lot of these American countries, these are guys that some of these people are ex-soldiers. They have special military training. Now, where you could talk about some of them are addicts, that's a whole other kind of conversation. But I wanted to answer the initial question. I see what Traore is doing. See, Traore, even though he took power, what is he doing with that power? He is educating the children. He is putting industry in place. He is doing productive things within that country, within that society, rather than taking away. This guy, I don't see or have heard Traore trying to instigate raping off the women and exacting. Well, he trying to impose the death penalty again, which is kind of worrying. But I don't see him trying to do the same kinds of things what so-called conquerors have done historically. But what I would say that there is a black leader or some black leaders like Kagame. Kagame is trying to get some of the resources. I think in the Congo right now, he's doing a whole lot of intrusions into other people's country, lamenting kind of, indirect wars and imposing himself as Rwanda is into other people's country, trying to do it what these guys have done, these European guys have done. So there's an argument for that. There's an argument, definitely, I think. But I'll leave it.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to cast any aspersions on Traore and them. I just was trying to see if there is a parallel thinking that you would find from black folks who are saying to themselves, we got to go and take over some shit. We got to conquer. And I don't really see it. I don't really see, especially with other people. We don't really go and say, we're going to go take over England. You know what I mean? But these guys have this mindset. They have the mindset. Now, whether they can carry it out is different, but they have the mindset that we could kill off the men and molest the women and children. We will do that. And I just don't see where black folks do that. And so it comes back to that notion of, well, is it in the DNA, so to speak, Any last
Coco, I think that some of us have thought about it. There's not necessarily been a person to actively do it, but some of us have thought about it. Don't think 1 minute and believe that some of us have not thought about that. England is 60 million, and England has a whole lot of different kinds of things, but some of us have thought about it. In particular, I tell you, a lot of the Muslims, have thought about it. So I would say people have thought about it in black countries. They just have not done it as yet. They've not done it as yet, actively done it. That's a whole other thing. I don't know if we'll see that in the future going forward. Who knows?
Yeah, interesting. Okay. I won't belabor the point, but I thought it was an interesting story when I saw it, and I wondered if we have any examples of black folks really trying to do this type of stuff. But I don't think we do. With that said, we could go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 2. Shoot the Breeze topic number 2 says, Decolonizing the Black World, Martinique edition. This comes with two. Hold on a second. There's one thing with StreamYard that's weird. It'll knock off your sound for some reason. So we should be back. You guys tell me if you don't hear it. But both attachments take us to Instagram. This is the first one. If you don't hear it, let me know so I can try to fix it.
This is a message for our Caribbean brothers and sisters. I want to thank you all for standing with us. What happened in Martinique this November is not just a victory. This is a proof that our determination cannot be criminalized. Out of 11 defendants, only 2 were found guilty, and even they received no sentence. This is a major win because some of us were facing jail time, and no one is threatened. Everybody was walked out of this trial free and standing tall. We must stand tall in our humanity. And this is what we do. We never hide in anything. We never denied. We never back down. We have always fully taken responsibility for our actions. And this is what precisely allowed us to win this case. We filmed our action in daylight. We posted them on social media, and we claim them openly because we do not act in the shadows. We act in the name of our ancestors, and they couldn't accuse us of vandalism because what we did was not a crime, it was a stand, diminished or dehumanized by any colonialist symbol. In our fight against colonialism, tearing down statues is just one step. The real enemy is invisible. This is a system designed to control, to silence, to exploit, to poison. Those systems do far more harm than any monument of stone, and we are determined to dismantle them as well. Thank you, everybody, and let's get to work. This is a message. What happened in Martinique?
Yeah, my computer's acting up. I apologize. It's moving kind of slow. So this post, by the way, was from Know Your Caribbean, and it has a caption that says, "We will not apologize. This historic victory for Caribbean decolonization is a huge reason for us to celebrate and still know we have work to do. Thank you at Jay Asani and our entire activist family in Martinique. Often we do not recognize the work of the non-English speaking Caribbean, but I am here to tell you real affirmative action is happening right now. To see this work being done is a huge inspiration for the region. The 11 anti-colonial activists who pulled down 4 statues honoring European legacies of slavery and genocide did not commit a crime. It was a crime for the statues to be mounted in the first place. There is a lot to be excited and inspired about, and let's all continue to support our Caribbean change makers who continuously choose not to be subjects to colonial subjugation." Basically, more fire. You see a lot of people backing that up. Let me see if this will work. There's another attachment here. I don't know why that is. Just bear with me a second here. Gotta share it again. So this is, make sure you guys can see my screen. This is another attachment. I'll play it and then we'll discuss it all.
Maman ka plewe ti kaila ka kule ya ba mo condamné à force ici travail ba be keme cholu ke ba be me jamais bo kayu pe kenyan pa be la li non ka leve ho jeli je maman ho wo jili ma lele ho jeli je maman ho maman ka hele ba mo condamné ho yo travail ba be ke ho me yo ka ba be ho yo travail ba be ke ho yo ka ba be ho
What's funny, this scene right here reminds me of a scene, Buana knows the scene. It reminds me of a scene that happened in the Bahamas a couple of years ago. I want to say during the pandemic, where a guy took an axe and chopped down Christopher Columbus' leg and the statue of Christopher Columbus' leg and all that. Shout out to Daily Africans, like Pauline saying good evening. Good evening to you, my dear. Thanks for coming through. So yeah, shoot the read topic number 2. Decolonizing the Black World, Martinique edition. Something the sister said in the caption in the previous attachment that we looked at on Instagram. That is true. We often don't discuss the work being done in the French Caribbean. Yeah, it's almost like a different world to us in a sense. But they're putting in work, and it's good to see. Buana, what say you? You're from the quote-unquote English-speaking Caribbean. What say you about the work being done in Martinique?
I first of all, that girl is, she's straight battle. She's straight battle. But I feel a little bit ashamed because these people have decided to get rid of these monuments. And really and truly, the act itself is symbolism for a reason, because young people who are gonna watch the kinds of things in the Francophone Islands in the Caribbean, they're gonna question why would they take these statues down, and then the question gonna present other kinds of questions, and it's gonna spark an interest in why these young people have decided to do these kinds of things. And I think that the fact that they're developing a sense of consciousness within the Francophone Islands, outside of Haiti, because you always hear about Haiti, you don't hear about Guadeloupe, you don't hear about Martinique, you don't hear about French Guyana. And the fact that these people have decided to actively remove these monuments is a very symbolic kind of thing. I would just wait to see what the follow-up is. But I'm proud of Martinique for trying to peek their head up and trying to develop a brain on this thing, and I'm waiting for the day when we decide to remove some of the statues that's lingering around here. The guy who tried to remove Christopher Columbus, he was promptly arrested. That right now, time for attempting that. But the fact that the Martinicans are trying to decolonize themselves, even on a symbolic level, I think is a very good thing. I think it's a start of a great thing in that country. I think it started all over the Caribbean right now, to be honest with you. And I think that is the reason why the USS Gerald Ford is in the Caribbean waters right now. You think that when Mia Mottley goes before the world and starts raising pressing questions about the country to the north, the dominant country to the north, and what they are doing, that sends a signal to the rest of the world. You think that the fact that they having relationships, the Caribbean countries are starting to develop relationships outside of the northern country, outside of the country to the north of them, that is presenting the thing. So, well, the natives are being restless. We need to get a hold of this thing before this gets out of hand. So that's why they bring in the big stick to maneuver around the Caribbean Sea, to let everyone know y'all need to stay in your place. But the natives we ain't gonna never stop being restless until we get our freedom eventually. So it's a long fight, but we can continue to do what we need to do. And I'm glad the Martinicans are doing what they're supposed to do, just like their ancestors. So the Martinique and Guadeloupe have the same kind of revolutionary history as Haiti does. But sometimes it's overlooked because Haiti was so grand scale. But I believe that we speak with one voice in the Caribbean, whether we speaking with a Spanish accent or we speaking with a French one or an English one. I think that, there's a whole lot of cohesion that exists. We understand our connectiveness. So I think that the eventuality, this is just going to spread like wildfire. That's what I see it as. Because what goes on in Martinique, believe it or not, is going to go on in the other Caribbean countries. It's just a matter of time. It's the same thing with when me and Motley say, well, we want to become a republic. Then you have Jamaica start talking about it. When they start having relationships with African countries, like Jamaica, Barbados, other countries want to join in. So I think that, in the Caribbean, sometimes monkey see, monkey do. That's an old racist saying, but I think that it'll eventually spread. And I think that these kinds of videos is gonna accelerate these kinds of notions, ideas in the minds of young people. The old uncles, we need to get rid of them, man. They trying to hold on to a history that is past and gone and need to be buried with a big rock over it. But I'll leave it there, Koku.
Yeah, I stopped sharing the screen because I don't know, my computer is being very glitchy right now. Hopefully you guys they can hear me. Drop a one if you can still hear me clearly. Trigger Happy in the chat said it probably doesn't help that it's considered completely part of France too. So people skip over these countries. Absolutely. Afro Native World says I was listening to Soukous music, and in some songs they shout out all the French colonized Caribbean islands, aside from the former French colonies in West Bibiman or West Africa. There's an interesting dynamic there. With that said, Black Seal, what say you? Decolonizing the Black World, Martinique edition.
I say tear down all those statues. I think that's a wonderful thing. And I realize it's symbolism, right? But symbolism has its place, right? And it's important that you can look for images of people who represent you. And the fact they tore down these slave masters and these people who colonized the island and introduced slavery, that's a good thing, right? And we see how, here in the States, when people were taking down those statues and getting upset, how important that was to the establishment to have these heroes. So I think it's definitely a positive step in the right direction to get rid of all of them. And I actually hope the idea spreads even more.
You remember?
Yeah, I think you're right, Black Seal. Go ahead, Juana.
I didn't mean to cut you off, Koku. Black Steel, do you remember when they took down the image of Saddam Hussein in Iraq? It played everywhere, all over CNN, and everywhere. It was sending a message to the world that there's a new governance in charge. And everyone saw it, the whole world. They made sure of it. They played it over and over and over again. And I think that, like you say, symbolism has its place. So one good turn deserves another. I remember they was taking down statues in the United States. Now they putting them back up. now Trump trying to put them back up.
Yeah, I was just going to. Yeah, Trump is trying to put some of them back up. But I was just going to kind of reiterate that when Buano was saying, Black Seal mentioned this, when Buano was saying symbolism, I kind of winced a little bit because I don't want the listeners or the future listeners to think that, we're saying that, they're just doing it for show. I like Juana did expand upon. I think it's good to do these things because, like Juana said, the youth are gonna question why y'all doing that. I just hope that the messaging around the actions are clear, and that it becomes a teachable moment where you inform the youth. We don't look up to these guys who came over here and dragged us from our country, killed off the indigenous, dragged us from our countries, and enslaved us out here. So I think it's good stuff. Like Juana said, monkey see, monkey do. That's an old saying that we have. You know, and I hope that others will follow suit. I think that's the thing that our enemy has to work the hardest at. This notion of if that set of slaves sees the other set of slaves doing something, they're going to be inspired, and I think that's why they put in so much work with the, you know, like right now, Buana is saying how they got the ships in the Caribbean right now. They got, you know, all these different measures to kind of make sure. In fact, this whole, I don't know if you guys saw it, but I didn't make it a topic tonight because I didn't have a chance to get into it. But there's this whole Somali conversation. And of course, here comes the folks from the continent. Here come folks from America who's talking about who's African and who ain't. And all of that is a part of the don't let them see that set of Africans do something, because the other ones will want to follow suit. So we have to keep that in mind. Is there any last thoughts from the panelists on this topic? All right. With that said, let's just go right into it. Should read topic number 3 then. Should read topic number 3 says AI is taking over. This one is for Sister Raw. So this came with an attachment that's taking us to YouTube. Shout out to Sister Raw as well, by the way. Sister Raw, if you're watching in the playback, this one's for you, I guess.
Where are we supposed to go? Back to where you began. The Caucasus Mountains. Build something better there.
Daddy, I don't want to go to the Caucasus Mountains. I want to stay here.
You are ordered to evacuate peacefully. The mountains await your rebuilding. This is a troglodyte we're dealing with.
James, they said we gotta leave tonight. They're taking us to the mountains. Tell them we're family.
James, they said we gotta leave tonight. They're taking us to the mountains. Tell them we're family. I don't want to go to the Caucasus Mountains. I want to stay here.
All Caucasoid partners report to processing.
Caucasoid partners report to processing. Repeating.
She's my family. You can't decide who I love. Move them now.
You leave tonight to the Caucasus.
Every American citizen of European descent will be relocated.
They can't really do this, can they?
For the sake of this nation, they will go. And they will endure.
They're sending us to freeze.
Then we don't freeze. We survive.
We never meant no harm.
Then you should have said something when harm was done.
That movie could win an Academy Award today for me. Just off the trailer. Caucasoid Nation, man. Sister Raw, that one's for you. Sister Raw likes to use that term Caucasoid a lot. I see Trigger Happy in the chat. I see Kofi laughing his ass off in the chat. Trigger Happy says LOL. The matron says, I wish this was really a movie. And Sister Cheryl puts up the fire emojis and the laughing emoji. That's funny. You know what? I want to play that again. I want to see it one more time. Let me just allow me to play this one more time, just to see something real quick.
Where are we supposed to go? Back to where you began. The Caucasus Mountains. Build something better there.
Daddy, I don't want to go to the Caucasus Mountains. I want to stay here.
You are ordered to evacuate peacefully. The mountains await your rebuilding. This is a troglodyte we're dealing with.
James, they said we gotta leave tonight. They're taking us to the mountains. Tell them we're family.
James, they said we gotta leave tonight. They're taking us to the mountains. Tell them we're family. I don't want to go to the Caucasus Mountains. I want to stay here.
All Caucasoid partners report to processing.
Caucasoid partners report to processing. Repeating.
She's my family. You can't decide who I love. Move them now.
You leave tonight to the Caucasus.
Every American citizen of European descent will be relocated.
They can't really do this, can they?
For the sake of this nation, they will go, and they will endure.
They're sending us to freeze.
Then we don't freeze. We survive.
We never meant no harm.
Then you should have said something when harm was done.
Yeah, there's a couple of little conversations in there. I see the chat is enjoying that one. There's a couple of conversations in there. The spouses of white folks in this scenario. What will they do, and what will become of them? So we could have the conversation of, as this is a AI conversation as well. It's a movie trailer conversation as well. But we can also talk about what would it look like in real life were this to happen? Let me start with Juan on this one. Juan, what say you?
What what I have to say about this is the power of the mind and the power of imagination. Okay, and the reason why I say that is before you see people on the streets of the United States right now showing up in black masks and all that stuff like that. People dream these kinds of ideas up way before Trump was elected. Way before Trump did it. And some people say, well, this is a fantasy. It'll never happen. It could never happen. But somebody had the idea. And he was able to get next to the person who was able to manifest that idea. Everything that we see and experience starts from the imagination, starts from the mind. There's a famous book by a white supremacist called The Turner Diaries. And don't you know, many white supremacists have read that book and manifest some of the ideas in that book. In particular, this guy named Timothy McVeigh. All these ideas start in the mind. And then in the future, people have the ability to manifest these ideas. Now, I'm not saying that these things are going to exist in America, but who would have thought America in 1990 would look like America in 2025? How it look? People literally getting pulled off of the street and getting sent back. What's happening in this video is almost in reverse of what's actually happening right now on the streets. Now, true, it's a dream, but a dream could come true. A dream could come true, and it's coming true for some people. And what I would tell the brothers and sisters is, make your children and grandchildren dream. Make them have big dreams, big dreams that you can't necessarily fulfill, but they will have even the audacity to attempt. Now, I don't have to be kicking all the Europeans out of the United States, but it could be some big dream, some audacious dream. Give them the ability to dream, because they don't put a barrier to European dreaming. They don't put a barrier and say what they can and what they can't do. This is why the two white troglodytes was trying to go to Haiti to take it over, because their ancestors did it in the past. You know what I mean? So these people are big dreamers, and I would tell the brothers and sisters, don't stop dreaming in a very, very big way, in a huge way, because someone will come along and try to manifest these dreams and ideas. That's what I say, and this is why AI is useful, because you could implant certain ideas into the minds of people, whether you consciously or unconsciously or subconsciously doing it. The mind is an extremely powerful thing. That's what I would say. I'll leave it.
So Bonnie, you touched on the AI part, and you touched on the quote unquote unrealistic thinking, and how it might be unrealistic to us now, but it can manifest, and that's great. I agree. What do you think, or how do you think it would play out if what was shown in that trailer, that AI trailer? How do you think that will play out in the real world? How do you think white folks will take it, and how would black folks take it?
I think that we would have a civil war the United States will engage in an extreme civil war. I think that a lot of black and non-white people would be on the side of Europeans to stop that removal from ever happening. I think there'll be a whole lot of bloodshed and death. One of the comments that was made in the video was this black man saying to the officers, "You can't stop. You can't help who you love." You would hear a whole lot of that being shouted out. A whole lot of that. This matter of fact is being shouted out right now. You have you have white women, trying to stop officers from kidnapping or removing their black, Haitian, African partners to go send them back to where they came from. You have that manifesting right now. So I think the same thing may happen in reverse. It absolutely would. It absolutely would. And I think before that happened, though, it'll be a whole lot of death. No one right now is more armed. America right now has more arms into the hands of private citizens than there are people. So if you start forcefully removing people off of the streets of the United States, it's only a matter of time when people can take matters into their own hands. And then ICE will really have something to deal with on their hands. It's just a matter of time. So I think that before that happened, you would see a whole lot of bloodshed and death. And I don't wish that on no one. I really don't. I don't wish that on anyone.
I would say you'd have to assume that for the events of the trailer to be real, yeah, that war already happened. People died, but let's say black folks won. So I'm going to throw this one to Black Steel. If this were true, do you think black folks have the fortitude to expel whites back to the Caucasus Mountains? What say you, Black Steel?
No, no, I don't think so. Most black people do not see white people as a threat, right? So no, I don't think they would have the will to do something like this. In fact, the black people probably defend the white people harder than if the case, of course, and vice versa. It would be like a reverse Underground Railroad. They'd be hiding white people in their cellars. They'd be trying to sneak them into Canada. Stuff. So no, I don't see that type of behavior is not in us. Even now, you got black people squaring up with ICE agents in the United States. Black people usually tend to lean towards the side of justice, and they would probably defend their white neighbors with their lives, I'm afraid. There are some like myself who probably would sit back and see what's on TV, but I don't think the majority of the black community would be willing to do something like this. I think they would probably try to hide or protect their white neighbors or their white friends or their white relatives. That's just my thoughts on it. I don't believe that yeah, go ahead.
Black Steel, I would like to ask you a question. Do you think the reason for that is black people can't imagine a world that they could exist without a white or European presence, or even, I would dare say, dominance, people in control? Do you think that would be one of the reasons for them not fighting back and not wanting that to happen? Or do you think it's just a matter of fairness and justice?
I think it's a matter that black people especially are colonized, right? And when you're colonized, you see yourself as the enemy. So that's my thoughts. I believe that the colonization has to be from. The mentality that we would need to do something like this, we just, as a collective group, we don't have that. So there just would have to be a change in our outlook on the world. Not so much we just want to be around white people, but there is that element too. Because again, they have constructed the world to see themselves as the ideal, no matter how many crimes and atrocities they commit. So that's just my opinion on that. But yeah, I don't think that. But I do think it is possible though. But it's just a matter of will, not skill, if you ask me.
So, Black Steel, I'm going to come back to you to speak on the whole AI of it. But before that, though, I want to ask you guys a question. the Britons. The Britons were enslaved by the Romans, right?
Yes.
Do you think the Britons do you think the Britons would hide the Romans? Let's say the Britons took power. Do you think they would hide the Romans and talk about, oh Lord, I don't want the Romans to go? Just out of curiosity, do you think that will be the case, or do you think that the imposition of race and the construct of race has something to do with that when it comes to us? Why would we be like, oh Lord, don't send the white folks away, the oppressor away? Why would that be the case for us? But if we don't think the Britons, for example, or whoever was oppressed by a group of people wouldn't have done that, then why would we do it? Anyone could answer.
I would say this, that the technology for propaganda is much more sophisticated now in the 21st century than it would have been in the first century, right? So one thing too is that the Romans conquered the Britons, right? They were prisoners of war, but they used brute force. But in our current world today, it's a lot more complicated. There's no hammer, but when you have a constant stream of propaganda that is being pushed into the mind, right? Again, you would not see the people realize, oh, this is our enemy. No, we should try to help these people. I mean, between the religion, which is indoctrinated us to love our enemies, and the media and everything else like that, it would be a big problem. Not the fact that these people back then, it's a little different time. I think that the mentality is the big issue, if you ask me.
If I would say anything, here's what I am watching in real time is the current president of the United States is trying to actively put in place policies to remove non-European people from the country, actively trying to do that and replace them with Europeans. In fact, one of the most of the bans right now in getting access to the Americas is in non-white countries, brown and black countries, all over the place. So if you allow him to have his way, or what's the other guy on them, the bald head guy, I can't remember his name now. These guys are actively trying to make America white again, whatever that means. Whatever that means. So if it's not beyond the gate of a person like the president, currently the president of the United States, I don't know I think that we may have I don't know. I think it'll be a small select group of black men getting office and women getting office and have the fortitude to create that kind of act. I think that just as this president is currently doing that. And let me tell you another thing. If he could get rid of the black population, and this is an unsaid thing, by the way, if he could get rid of the African American population, he would try to do that as well. Make no mistake about that. Make no mistake about that. Because this is where this is going. I don't know. Maybe it's just me being a conspiracy theorist. But if you look at his mentality and the ideas that this man is spewing from his mouth and the rhetoric, he wants that to happen. So I don't know. One good turn is good, just as good as the other one. That's just me. That's just me. I'll let Shirley's. How are you doing, Amma? I hope you're well, sister.
So but before we go to Sister Cheryl, Black Steel, what are your thoughts on AI and how? Because you talked about propaganda. Can we use AI? Can we use AI now to propagandize ourselves?
Absolutely, I think we should. This very video is a good example of propaganda. Yeah, AI is a tool that can be used for good or bad, and I think this was a good tool to spark conversation. But yeah, absolutely, it can. Actually, it should as well. It should be used as that because That's what our enemy is using. They're using AI to distort these things. So why can't we use it to propagandize our own people? It's an excellent tool for that, if you ask me.
Well said. In the chat earlier, Trigger Happy disagreed with you guys. He said heavily disagree. Kemet debunks this, that we have the ability to kick our enemies out. So that isn't really true. It's only true now because we are bred to think like this. Then later on, Trigger comes around. He agrees with a point that I think Black Steel made. He says, "Yep, I can agree with that. We have been bred in this way. It's also why we aren't quote unquote nice, because if we were, we would have unified by now. Because our temperament is universal to all, making Black unity easy." Afro-Native World says integrationism in all societies of this hemisphere really is problematic. Relating to the convo earlier about whites in the Caribbean, Black people fight for them now. Imagine if this were to happen. That's a heavy point. That's a heavy point. Which is kind of why, in many ways, I think, I'll just put this out there. This is why I think we need to start separating ourselves. I mean, we should have been doing that already, but we really should be trying to separate ourselves completely from these folks, because there might come a day where this propaganda works on some of us in the future, and we expel these white folks from up around us. We don't want to have to fight our own people to have to expel our open enemy, and that's something we have to think about. In the meantime, though, let's welcome in Sister Cheryl. Sister Cheryl, how are you this week?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Can I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, you just fine. Good evening, Cheryl.
Hi, good evening. So, I guess the original question was, is AI taking over? I would say yes, and I would agree with some people in the chat that say that it can be used for good, like for Black people. I think in the Black world, like on the continent, there are ways that we can use it to, I guess, show our own people that, kind of like what this video was doing, showing our people that, these people are not to be, messed with. Like, we should stay away from them. It can have a positive effect on us, but it can also have a negative effect. And I know that people are just, with this video, they're just playing around with ideas. But I think, like, right now, like in reality, I see how AI is being used against us. I think there was against Black people. I think there was a video that came out about some Black people, and they said they were, I don't know, committing some crimes, but they weren't really committing any crimes. It was just AI. And I was just like, ooh, that can definitely get worse over time. I mean, they're just playing around with stuff, but like that can definitely turn into something pretty awful. I I don't know how more awful it can get, but you know how AI is. And then I just, it's a slippery slope. I've seen it used in positive ways in the Black world, and I've seen it used in negative ways. But in terms of the video, I thought the video was interesting. I saw a lot of different things, like what a lot of people pointed out with the white woman and the Black man. She was like, "Oh, save me, Black man!" Like, I mean, I just think of it like how Africa is now. Like, there are white people there, but there aren't a whole lot of white people there. They're just like controlling Africa from afar, right? So I kind of look at it like, I see this Black man, he's telling them to go back to the Caucasus Mountains, but he's still wearing a suit and he's still upholding white institutions. So I'm just like, okay, well, the worst that can happen for white people, is that they go back to Europe or whatever, but they're still control the Black people in, I guess that was America. I'm assuming the Black people in America are still controlled by white people, kind of like Africa. That's how I was thinking it. Like, kind of, I don't know, like, but I do agree with like everybody's saying about how there's going to be like a lot of tension with, if that were to actually happen, like Black people fighting for their white spouses, because you see that now. But yeah, I just kind of saw those little minute details. I was like, they go back to the Caucasus Mountains, they be all right. Because I mean, they got their puppets in Africa, so they just have their puppets in America. So
Yeah, Afro World agrees with you. He said good point. He said neo-colonialism. Trigger Happy makes a point here too. He says we have to figure out some of the ecological constraints to AI, though. And a lot of AI is not owned by us either. The ecological is also why the spiritual is important. The part I wanted to really, I mean, all of it is valid. The part I want to point out is that we don't own the AI. So I fool around with ChatGPT and Canva, which has an AI model as well. This is how I make some of the graphics for the like Shoot the Breeze thumbnail and stuff. And I'll tell you something I noticed. You don't have the freedom to put in any prompt you want. You put in a prompt and say, okay, I want to show a Black guy defeating a white guy in a boxing ring. Some of these models will tell you straight up, I can't do that. And I find that very interesting. That there's these constraints, and it's because we don't own it, we don't define it. Because I'm sure we defined, and if we own and defined the constraints of an AI ourselves, we probably wouldn't allow someone to come in and say white guy defeating Black guy. At least I hope we wouldn't. We do need to get on top of that. And I did see that video Alma was talking about, because it was some Black youth who they basically put words in the mouth of that they was planning some violence or saying something violent. Wasn't the case at all. They had one of the kids on TV too talking about how he didn't say anything like it, blah blah blah. But I will say to everyone who's paying attention, that little trailer that we watched, it's not that difficult anymore to do. It's not all text to video type stuff, but you might have to learn 1 or 2 things. We can all do that stuff. We can all put out our own little pieces of propaganda. But one of our problems is we don't technologize. And that's the thing that's going to destroy us if we're not careful. These other folks are technologizing. They're putting war technology together. They're putting propaganda technology together, and we're not really doing that anymore. I think Sister Cheryl wanted to make another point. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Amma. Go ahead.
So there was so remember when I think there was an issue with like the SNAP benefits when Trump was taking away SNAP benefits from people, or he was changing the rules, changing some policies around SNAP. And so there were a lot of videos, AI videos going on Instagram about Black women complaining about SNAP, their SNAP benefits being reduced. And it comes to find out all of those videos were fake. And they were, they were just like these belligerent videos of Black women in bonnets and sloppy and fat and everything. And they were just kind of, doing the mammy thing. And I was just like, there's no way this is real. And it was like, you couldn't tell though, like it was that good. Like you could not tell it was fake. And you would just assume that it's real because you do get people who get on social media and do stuff like that. But it was too much and it was too extra. It was just like something off about it. And that's the only way I could tell. But a normal person would not be able to tell that it was fake. And so I think it's in many, many ways, it's more detrimental to us than helpful. I mean, I guess while we can use it for what benefits us, but I don't think it's something that we should be totally reliant on.
Me personally, I love AI. I can't get enough of it. Coco, I would say check out DeepSeek instead of ChatGPT. Maybe DeepSeek don't have the same kind of constraints that ChatGPT has because the servers are they Chinese servers. So the constraints that's in the United States, you may find that you may be able to be more versatile by using DeepSeek. That's the one I use, and the way I use it is all right. For instance, if I have any kind of political or historic questions, I put into ChatGPT the different people of history, Black people history, Garvey, Gaston, a bunch of different people, Nkrumah or whatever. I have a series 6, and I know that AI scours the internet for all the quotes, all the books, everything they've written about every kind of question you could think about. And collectively, what AI will do is take that information based on the question I have, and it'll kind of like ask these different personalities in history the question I may have, if it's a political one, and it'll come up with an answer. It's the same thing in economically. You use the best minds because they've written so much material, books, different places where they sit. Warren Buffett's, Steve Jobs, all these other people. You could have a council of people, and the AI would scour the internet based off of the question you have, and it'll spell out an answer. Now, it's up to you how you interpret that answer, but AI could be very useful if you don't have face-to-face access with some of these people, either in present history or even in past history, because the AI scours all the things that's on the internet about these people, whether it's through book form or speeches or whatever, and it'll analyze it and it'll come up with an answer based off of what they would probably say. And that's how I find it to be extremely useful when I dealing with politics, economics, all manner of different, even food. So it's just how it's being used. I personally think, but
no, yeah, I agree with you, one. I think, we tend to get on to stuff when it's too late. I think now is the time, especially before they put more constraints. And by the way, thanks for the deep. Is it what DeepSeek? Deep what again?
It's called DeepSeek. DEEP Seek. SEEK. Yeah, just download it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it mentioned before, and I'll check it out. Because like I say, by the time we usually get on something is a little late. If you look at YouTube, a lot of us got on YouTube a little too late, as an example. So I think it's good for us to get on, get an understanding of what it can do, use it in our businesses. It's not all knowing, but it knows a lot, and it helps with research and cutting down time with research and stuff like that. So you should get on it. Someone in the chat named Milner, is that a white guy? Now that I'm looking at the image, Milner's Wrath 23. He said, "Is analytical intelligence not true artificial intelligence?" But Afro Native World asks a question. I'm going to throw it to you guys on the panel once I could find it. He asks a question: how do you guys feel about AI? He says, are y'all opposed to AI artists that are black made, AI musical artists that are black made? Anyone can answer in any order. What's your thoughts?
I don't really. Okay, so it's an AI artist, but it's made by black people. I'm a little confused.
Yeah, African world might need to clear it up a little bit. Are you talking about, like, for example, Timbaland created an artist the other day. I want to say she might be either Japanese or white. I can't remember. But he created this new artist and he put her out. There was a whole big thing about him putting out that's his new artist and stuff. So that could be one side of it. Or the other side of it could be someone who's making a black avatar using AI, replicating a black sound or what have you. I think Afro Native World might have been talking about the former, not the latter, of black artists putting out, say, a white artist who's AI. What are y'all thoughts on that? I'll send it back to Black Steel first.
Oh, I don't. I'm not opposed to it, but again, if it can be used for positive, for good, then I don't have a problem with it at all. I don't know how some of the others might feel, but I guess if you put it that way, I don't really see an issue.
You said a black person putting out a white AI artist.
No,
What do you say?
Afro Native World clarify. You said a black AI artist made by black people. How do you feel about a black AI rapper or calypsonian or reggae artist, but made by black people, right? What do you feel about that?
No, AI don't have no soul, brother. AI don't have no soul.
It depends on what it's being used for. Like, I think they're doing this on a BB to me as well. Because when you don't have the money to pay for an artist and you're in desperate need of an artist, someone to sing or to rap or to get a message across, then in that example, I would say yes. Then that would be a good alternative. Because how many people on the BB Toomey side, how many people are going to say, hey, yeah, I'll do that for free? You know what I mean? So, I mean, in terms of resources, I think it's a good substitute. So, yeah.
Sister Cheryl, just do me a favor and clarify. What does the BB Toomey have going on? You said they're doing something with AI?
Yeah, like, I think there's like music being put out, and I'm not sure if they've done it already, but, because my husband is also on a BB Toomey, so we're just talking to some people about them putting out AI artists, or they've been trying to look for people like actual black people, but to sing and to rap or whatever. But I think they're considering that the AI thing, and I think in that instance that then there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay, so just to be clear before I throw it to Juana and them, a BB Toomey is putting out AI music that sounds like black people made it, and I guess using a AI black artist to do it. That's very interesting. Is that what I'm to understand here?
Yes, and they're also using like AI, huh? Oh, they're also using like AI, like short clips to try to get messages across to black people about, just keeping things in the black world and keeping them sacred to black people. So I don't think it's anything wrong with that.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to be clear about it. Juana said something earlier. I think Afro Native World is saying here that we have to get Juana to hear it. It sounds real good. I know that you could listen to some AI stuff where they'll say, well, okay, I guess the prompt is like 50 Cent in the club, but 1950s crooner style or something like that, and some of that stuff sounds actually pretty good. So maybe that's what's going on here. Juana, what say you to it?
No, I think I have heard some of the things of what you're talking about, Cuckoo. And I think that what is going to be lost in that is the natural human voice. I think I agree. Me and Trigger Happy kind of agree with this element. I think that even though the music is good, it has no soul. There's always going to be something that's missing. You cannot mimic a BB King. You could get the sound similar, but something is going to be lost in translation. And I think it's going to be the human element, the little nuances, the little small things that the human being is actually doing, which is going to be replaced by the artificial whatever. I think that is going to be lost. There are some small things that a Bob Marley used to do, or a Burning Spear, or a Michael Jackson. These small little nuances that is given off in with not only with the human voice, but his movement, a lot of articulations, how he presented himself, is gonna be lost in the technology. And I think that I would, and I dare say soul. And I don't discuss these kinds of things too much, but Trigger Happy on this particular point, I agree with him completely. There's something that's gonna be lost in doing that. And I wouldn't want to do that. I would want to keep it natural. I would want to keep the actual human voice and give these a lot of these buskers, these artists on the street playing the guitar, trying to get on, give them an opportunity. They won't be able to make some money too. Give them an opportunity, But I would not want to replace the natural human voice with something that's robotic or electronic. I don't agree with that. I'm sorry.
So I have a question. Is it kind of like, I think we had this as a topic of discussion in the last stream. Is it kind of like, because I do agree with what you're saying too, but is it like how there's this sister that wants to have a robot braid black people's hair? Is it kind of like that? Like how
That's close.
you lose the connection?
That's close. You know what?
Okay.
You know what, Amma? You know what, Amma? If
Mhm.
you are absolutely right, you are absolutely right, and the fact that you pointed that out and made that correct connection, because when I actually presented that video, I didn't think about that. There's something with what Shaniqua does when she's rolling her hair, the black women's hair in a beauty salon that a robot cannot do. In terms of conversation, in terms of how she may slide the hair back, in terms of girls, these things, these little small nuances and elements that is bring a human connection where we have a relationship with one another is going to be lost by just using the robot. So you are right. I believe that you are right, and the fact that you did make that connection, I see it now. I didn't see it then when I actually presented that prompt, but there's something going to be lost. There's something going to be lost, and it's that human element, and you don't want to never give that up. So I agree with you in how you reference that. I really do.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah, that was a great pull there, Amma. Great pull. I'm gonna check out. I tried to look it up on YouTube to see if they had put it on YouTube. Maybe it's just on the BB Toomey right now, but I couldn't find Make Kemet Black again. Before I give this last point, Black Steel, did you want to add anything here?
I think everybody's kind of touched on everything as far as AI, but no, I'm good. I'm just cautious about it, but I'm cautiously optimistic about it. But no, I didn't have anything else to add.
Okay, thanks for that, Black Steel. Yeah, I'm gonna look up the artist. So the artist, I don't know how to pronounce the name. If you're looking at the stream, you'll see it up there on the screen. What I want to say about this topic, since it's about AI as well, I was watching an African guy on YouTube. I don't remember his name now. When I find it, I'll post it on the Discord. If you're not on the Discord, join the Discord. By the way, a lot of work is going to come on that Discord in the coming weeks after next week. One thing the African guy was showing, I think it's from Kenya too. He was showing how you can basically make like Pixar films nowadays using just using prompts and AI. You may have to use one or two other tools to go from text to video, but he was doing it. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And so, like a BB Toomey, I like where a BB Toomey and them have their head at. We need to start getting in on this stuff now, so we can start developing these stories, this propaganda, this messaging that we want to put out. Like, I think a great idea would be to put out some short story, some short film on like a Garveyite family or something, and show the children and how they respond to Garveyism, etc., etc. But you guys may have better ideas than me. I'll try to find a video. I'll post it in the general chat. You guys hit me up and let me know if you think it's if you think it's a good idea. African World says they are against putting up on any Eurasian social media. Yeah, I kind of figured that would be the case. But I said, let me try and see if someone, maybe not from a BB Toomey, but someone might have put it up on there, on YouTube. Trigger Happy says, good use of AI, like a machine that can clean rivers or something. But if I was running a government, all art and music must be made by people only. And that I can appreciate. If there's no other last thoughts here, let's go to Shooter Breeze topic number 4. Before we go there, let me just go back to a comment that Afro Native World had earlier that I liked a lot, that I think plays into the next topic. He said, oh man, where is it? He said something along the lines of how Black people fight for white folks now in parts of the Black world, and they use things like saying, well, he's a white Jamaican, so he's one of us type thing. I'm paraphrasing. I can't find the exact thing right now. But I think that kind of goes into the next topic. If you guys remember, there was a Chinese woman with a Jamaican accent who was scolding Black folks in Jamaica that out of many, one or something like that. She was telling Black Jamaicans that Jamaica is not a Black nation. It's a multicultural, this, that, and the other. Yeah, out of many, one people. Right, that's it. Out of many, one. That's the kind of thing you gotta be careful about if that movie trailer scenario were to play out. And I think this next topic kind of touches on that. Should there be something number 4 says
Coco.
Yes, sir.
Before you go to the next prompt, Muda Baruka made a song out of that same idea, out of many, one people. He said, but there was only one person who was cutting the sugar cane. There's only one person who was in the sun and rain. He said there's only one person who was. I can't remember the name of the song, but he had a response to this idea of out of many, one people, because he understands what the idea is. Because only one person who was doing the majority of the work in Jamaica for a very long time, dominantly in the fields in Jamaica, and creating what they say. There was the foundation of what Jamaica is right now. But you have all these new people saying, well, we had a stake in Jamaica as well. Yeah, I understand that. We respect that. But the reality is, you can't just come have a blanket and say, well, we can dismiss you and discard all the work you do before you get to this point. And I think that is a relevant argument in some circles. So,
well said. Yeah, well said, Warner. And that's what Afro was getting at. There'll be Black folks who will be defending that Asian woman in Jamaica. And as a matter of fact, under that Asian woman's video, I think we discussed it on Shoot the Breeze. A lot of Black Jamaicans were agreeing with her. A lot were agreeing with her. And that's the part of the problem you're going to have. You're going to have those Black folks who are going to say, nah, man, this guy here, Fred is a white guy, but he's a Bahamian man. And that's the kind of problem you're going to have. So let's go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 4. Can Pan-Africanism coexist patriotism. This is an interesting topic, I think. Let's go. It's a short video. Let me share my screen with you guys. All right, you guys should be able to see my screen. Make sure. Yep. We'll watch this short. I might play it twice, depending on how long it is, how long the video is, and then we'll discuss.
Individual to be both a true patriot of their African country and a true Pan-Africanist. But wait, I mean, considering everything we now know about Africa's history, the destruction of ancient civilization, the distortion of pre-colonial identities, and the long and brutal legacy of colonialism. What about the fact that Africa was partitioned with no regard for historical realities, cultural differences, and the relationship between different communities? You see, entire groups of people were forced into artificial borders, project called countries drawn by European elites with pencils and rulers in Berlin, Germany between 1884 to 1885. And when they were done dividing Africa without Africans' consent, each European empire claimed its piece as their property. So I ask, is it truly possible for an African individual to pledge loyalty to a nation state that exists within the confines of artificial borders drawn by European elites to separate the individual from the community and still be a Pan-African? Look, we are not fighting here. I'm just asking to understand patriotism within the African context and outside of Pan-Africanism. Help me.
Wait, Nini?
Is it truly possible for an African individual to be both a true patriot of their African country and a true Pan-Africanist? But wait, I mean, considering everything we now know about Africa's history, the destruction of ancient civilization, the distortion of pre-colonial identities, and the long and brutal legacy of colonialism. What about the fact that Africa was partitioned with no regard for historical realities, cultural differences, and the relationship between different communities? You see, entire groups of people were forced into artificial borders, project called countries drawn by European elites with pencils and rulers in Berlin, Germany between 1884 to 1885. And when they were done dividing Africa without Africans' consent, each European empire claimed its piece as their property. So I ask, is it truly possible for an African individual to pledge loyalty to a nation state that exists within the confines of artificial borders drawn by European elites to separate the individual from the community and still be a Pan-African? Look, we are not fighting here. I'm just asking to understand patriotism within the African context and outside of Pan-Africanism. Help me.
Yeah, so that out of many one thing, and I'm not picking on Jamaica at all, by the way. I'm just using that as an example, right? If they have that mentality out of many one, will they really, as a group, aspire to Pan-Africanism? Or will they say, nah, man, this brother over here, he's Jamaican like me too, etc. Same could be said about like Nigeria, for example. What are your thoughts? I'm gonna start with Sister Cheryl on this one. Sister Cheryl, what are your thoughts?
Oh, thank God. Okay. Okay, so I assume when we're saying patriotism, you're meaning American patriotism. Because when someone hears the word patriotism, that's the first thing. Well, that's the first thing that comes to my mind, because that's what the flag represents, right? That's patriotism. Now, we know what Pan-Africanism is, I assume, in the chat, and we know what we're talking about when we say patriotism. So to me, it's like saying I can be a Christian and I can also I can also worship Ogun. Or when I get married, I can have a white wedding and I can also have a traditional wedding. Now, people do these things, but they're contradictory to each other. Okay, and that's where you get, it's like, for instance, on the continent, when you see African people having their traditional wedding and then they have the white wedding, and you're thinking, well, why do they need the white wedding? Oh, because I'm Christian and I worship it. But if you have your traditional, if you have your traditions, then why do you need Christianity? And that's where I guess the contradictions come into play, and people try to remix something to be something that it's not. And I'm talking about patriotism. And we do that when we have an attachment to a particular culture or a particular religion to make it fit into Pan-Africanism. But it doesn't matter how much we try to make it fit, it doesn't fit, because that's what's happening with Jamaica. It's happening in America. We're trying to say out of many one people, while at the same time the Chinese and the Indians and the Europeans are buying up all the coastal properties, and they're taking all the money from the local Jamaican Black businesses and Black people who are trying to survive in the inner city's core. So if you go to Montego Bay, you can see this. As soon as you get to the island, first thing you see is hotels and little shops owned by Indians and Chinese, and your hotels owned by Europeans. That's the first thing you see. It's not until you get 2 miles into the city core that you see the Black businesses trying to scrape a living off of, whatever people are left after they done gone to the little shops on the coastline. So, I mean, it speaks for itself. You cannot have both existing at the same time. If you do have both existing, one is going to be suffering while the other is thriving.
I appreciate that, Sister Cheryl. Lord of Slaughter in the chat says, not outside of a Black nation. He or she says, Pan-Africanism is for Black nations. But again, I have to go back to that point. If a Chinese person in one of these nations says, listen, I got my mother's passport that's from this nation, I got my granny passport that's from this nation, and great granny, I'm of this nation. But if we're going to say that this nation is a Black nation, for example, where I'm from is considered a Black nation. If you're going to say that's a Black nation, then how do you deal with these people, right? And if you really embody that idea that everyone from this nation, let's say the Bahamas, that everyone from the Bahamas is a Bahamian and we all Bahamians, then how do you reconcile that with Pan-Africanism, especially the way Lord Slaughter defines it as Pan-Africanism is for Black nations? That's where some of the problems come from, which is why earlier in this show I said, we got to do some separating from now, because we're going to have to deal with these types of issues later on when we really get ourselves in a place where we can talk about Black unity or Pan-African unity throughout the continent and the diaspora. Black Seal, what say you?
I don't believe that Pan-Africanism can coexist with, if you're talking about patriotism, right? And like Cheryl said, to U.S. patriotism, how is it that definitely can't coexist? Because patriotism means, love of one's country. How can you be a Pan-Africanism and love the United States of America? Now, if we're talking about patriotism within the, say, for example, you have an African nation that is independent, you can be patriotic and still have your ideals of Pan-Africanism. But I don't think that within the context of, a Western society, it would be a complete oxymoron, in my opinion. How is it possible to be proud of the United States of America and turn around and be like, oh, but I love Pan-Africanism, when they're diametrically opposed? So it would only have to be, it could exist within a African nation, yes, but not outside of that. Those are just my thoughts.
But when you say African nation, you're including like the 16 black nations in the Caribbean and etc.
If that country's ideas are not opposed to Pan-Africanism, I don't see why you couldn't do it. But if you have a country like us, like America, then I don't see how you could be both. I think it really depends on the context of which nation you're patriotic about.
Gotcha. Okay. So you agree with Lord of Slaughter that says non-blacks can be citizens if they obey our laws, but no non-black business. But no non-black businesses are operating. Kamji versus join us in the chat. Shout out to Kamji. Kamji versus the next topic is one that's close to your heart, I would say. Afro-Native World asks Kamji verse, can you be a Cameroonian patriot and be a Pan-African? I'll be interested to see what Kamji has to say about that as well. Because what's his name gets a lot of flack for this too, by the way. What's the brother's name again, man? Dwayne Wong. Because Dwayne Wong is from Guyana, but he's of East Indian descent, I believe. And people give him some flack about that. So I'm curious to see what you guys think about that in totality. Buano, what say you to all of it?
Yeah, I'm glad Kamji is here, but seems like Kofi is running. But I would say this: it depends on where you are. And why I say that is, let's just say I could be a Haitian patriot, loyal to Haiti, and also be a Pan-African, because the foundation of our country is filled with Pan-Africans. The fathers of that nation were Pan-Africans. So there is not necessarily a big contradiction there. And in terms of development of our country, they created the constitution of our country itself. In saying that, and also saying that if you're an African person anywhere in the world and you reach the shores of Haiti, you are a Haitian person. So they was very inclusive in terms of the ideals of Pan-Africanism. One of the first groups of people are actually, in a practical way, operationalize Pan-Africanism. So I think that there's a possibility there. There's also a possibility, I would dare say, even in Barbados, for them getting rid of the crown and deciding to be a republic. And the leader right now currently is a Pan-African person. Mia Motley is a Pan-African person. So I don't see a lot of contradictions there. And maybe someone could point it out to me. In the Bahamas, though, I can't be a patriot of this country and be a Pan-African. There's too much contrast, because first of all, to be a member of parliament here in the Bahamas, you have to swear to the Queen, her heirs, and successors. That's one of the first things you have to do. You don't swear to the people. You have to swear to the Queen, her heirs, and successors. That is extremely problematic for a person who have the ideas of Pan-Africanism. So I can't be the two things. In Nigeria, they still have the British Whigs. So do we, the British Whigs or whatever. And I think that they have a federal system, but they still, in terms of the common law, they still have these ideas of British common law and all these things. So the infrastructure, the English infrastructure still is embedded there. So I don't see you could be, if you could be a patriot in Nigeria in one instance and be a Pan-African in another. I think that is extremely difficult. Maybe in Ethiopia, where the lines was in draw for them, those lines was originally there. And I think that Haile Selassie did practice a degree of Pan-Africanism. So I don't see a contradiction in Ethiopia. And maybe the AES countries right now, where the leadership is Pan-African, and you could be a patriot of Burkina Faso, but they don't disclude or discount other people from coming in to participate in what they're trying to do in the development or wherever. And also they are currently working together. So I don't see a contradiction there. But for me, in this country, I can't do it. I can't be a Bahamian patriot as it stands and be a Pan-African. I think there's too much contradictions that exists between the two ideas. Too much contradictions, man. So I would just say that I think it depends on where you are. It depends on where you are, and it depends on the style of government, leadership of government. It depends on a whole lot of different kind of nuances that exist. But I can't be one. I can't be one. So that's where I am with that.
So what about Garvey then? Because Garvey was from Jamaica, which was under the crown, the English crown at the time when he was alive. And in fact, they were still under the crown when he died. Could he not be a proud Jamaican but still be Pan-African?
That's an interesting thing that you would say that, because one of the things that Garvey said when Garvey's in the United States, he's like, these people trying to criticize me of being an implant, an immigrant or from Jamaica. He said, I am an African person first and foremost. You know what I mean? He disrobed himself of that ideology from long time. It's people from the outside looking in who keep on trying to cage him into that idea of I'm a Jamaican this or Jamaican that. Garvey saw himself as as an African first. That's why he could label himself as the provisional president. You know, but the Jamaicans after he died now put him as the Jamaican hero. But Garvey disrobed himself of this idea of Jamaican nationalism long time before even the discussions with Du Bois in the United States of America. It's other people who was trying to label him as that and limit him as that. But he disrobed himself of that ideology. He said that there was a time that I could be one of the wealthy Black Jamaicans and suit and make all my friends around me comfortable. Or I could have taken up the task to Africa and all these ideas that Africa, or being a part of this African experience, was his challenge to do. And he decided to take up that task. So I think that you could carry a Jamaican passport as far as travel documents, but as far as being patriotic to Jamaica, Garvey is patriotic to Africa and African people first and foremost. So I just really wanted to be kind of clear about that. You know, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it.
No, you're right. You're right. He said something along the lines of, "Why would I choose island over continent?" Right. Afro World points out in the chat how Garvey goes hard against Jamaica in the philosophies and opinions of Marcus Garvey. And he says it's because Jamaica went hard against him. Lord of Slaughter said Black nations should be territories of Africa. Cheryl, you want to share what you said in the chat?
Yeah, I've just so personally, maybe it's something that's of my ignorance, but I've never heard of patriotism being used anywhere outside of America unless it's being referred to America, like some form or fashion of culture of America in another country. I'm just a little bit confused about that. But my husband says that Jamaica has the most churches per square mile. So again, that makes me wonder, what is what is Jamaican patriotism? What is when a person says Cameroonian patriotism? Like I need, like, what does that look like? Because if the nation is dominated by someone else's religion, is that what encompasses the patriotism? Or like, what is the patriotism? Okay, is the patriotism, so for instance, for Cameroon, is the patriotism representative of the name of the country, or is it representative of the indigenous ethnic groups of the nation?
I personally think that. Go ahead, Kofi.
No. I was just going to say, well, African of the World says it here. Each country has patriotism. So, the Black American, not all, but nowadays some, are U.S. patriots. Jamaica, book, Jamaica. And all the things that go into what it is to be, kind of a big supporter of the country, the nation where you're from. I think that's what we're talking about. So African of the World points out, for example, Dominican patriotism is them being anti-Haitian, right? So is it possible to be pro-Jamaican, pro-Bahamian, pro-Haitian, and still be or pro-America and still be a Pan-African? Black Steel tells us earlier, he says to be pro-American, you cannot be Pan-African. Is that the stance that once you've taken on the Pan-African ideology, these nations that we might be from originally they don't really matter as much anymore? It's just about African, Pan-African unity. I think that's the question that's being asked here. And Cheryl, you said no, right?
Mm-mm. It's kind of like people, okay, people do it. It's kind of like what I was explaining with how Black people like to have the white wedding and the traditional wedding. They like to be Christians, and they also want to be, Black power and about that life. Like, you can't. It's a contradiction. Like I feel like people go into Pan-Africanism with good intentions, but ideologically it's all over the place. It's like, you can't, like, if you're a Christian, you're like, what's the purpose of a Christian? To spread the gospel. So if you're spreading the gospel, how to all people, and you're saying all people, in the Bible they say, spread the gospel, and doesn't matter what that's what people say now who are Christian. You're pacified. Everybody's your friend. Everybody is worthy of the word of God. How can you say that and be everybody's friend and be a Pan-Africanist? So Pan-Africanist means to put your own people first. That's a contradiction.
Okay. Bonnie, want to add something?
No, I'm not patriotic to no former slave colonies where I was kidnapped and brought to. That's a ridiculous kind of idea. And Amma is right. I've never heard of a black patriot from these other African Caribbean. I've never heard of it.
Never.
Now, if you're talking about love for eating oxtails and curry chicken and whining and whining on a woman during carnival, yeah, I mean, or being, saying, well, we want this person to win the race in the Olympics. If that's patriotic, I guess that's what that is. But as far as fighting, bleeding, and dying, and willing to die for any of these countries, I don't know. I don't know about all of that. I think that Patrick Henry, stated like, my country right or wrong, and even if it's wrong, my country all the same. You know what I mean? So these guys' ideas where we ain't never really been in no revolutionary war to fight, and maybe Haiti, like I say, maybe Haiti. I could see it. I could see it in Haiti. But as far as these English colonies here, I don't see that. I don't see that. Like I say, outside of winding up on your woman during carnival and with flag waving, I don't see that. I don't see that exist. And as far as Africa is concerned, many of these, I don't know. Let me don't speak for the continental Africans. Maybe Trigger Happy could bring more clarity to that.
Yeah, Trigger, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well. So African in the world says, so Botswana is not patriotic to the Bahamas, huh? Cheryl echoes the sentiment. Haiti might be the only exception. And that's how I was going to bring up Haiti next. Like, do we not consider Haiti and Haitians to be, their thing, and how their love for their country and culture, but yet still believe in Pan-African unity? I don't know. Black Steel, you've been quiet for a little while. What say you?
Sorry, I had to give him the microphone back. No, Haiti is probably the only. Well, no. So Haiti's probably the exception, but it doesn't necessarily have to remain that way, right? I think that, for example, what's happened in the Sahel states, right? I think that is something that you can be proud of as a member of those states, and also as a part of the larger Pan African movement. So even though I think their goals are noble, they're trying to expand and remove the African power and remove the French influence. That's definitely something to be proud of as well. So I think it can go for certain situations.
All right. So
I think that. I'm sorry. I think that because the brother say I'm patriotic. No, I'm not patriotic in no former slave colonies. If this former slave colony is willing to wage a war for real independence, like how Haiti waged a war for real independence, and we getting busy here, and there is something meaningful birthed out of that, I understand that idea. But we have not decided to do that yet. And I like Black Steel's academic answer. Such a teacher. He say not yet. And I could respect that. I respect that answer. Not yet. So not yet for us. Not yet.
Good stuff, y'all. Good stuff. With that said, man, if there's no last thoughts, let's go to our final topic for tonight. Shoot the breeze, topic number 5. Shoot the breeze, topic number 5 says, this is one of those long ones again. Ivan van Sertima gets a lot of disrespect today due to pretendians, but there seems to be some truth here. Are there any objections to his claims with counter evidence? So this takes us, I didn't add it yet. Give me 1 second to grab the link. This is going to take us to YouTube. Real quick, I'm pulling it up for you guys. By the way, while we wait for this to load, Cam G Verse, who this video is from that we're going to watch, had asked me on Discord to do a shoot the breeze that discusses Ivan van Sertima's work. And I don't have an issue with doing it, but I'd like, this is what I want to say to Cam Diverse and Trigger Happy and such. Get the detractors to come on the show, because a lot of that discussion is technical to a certain field of study, archaeology, anthropology, etc. And I don't know if I'm equipped to really ask the follow-up questions and to navigate that. I'm not sure if Buana and Black Steel are either. So the people who are detractors, who who are on Twitter going against Comgyverse about it, let's try to get them, invite them to come through so that that conversation can be had and we can kind of help facilitate the follow-up questions, etc. By the way, Afro-Native World tells me Dwayne Wong is of Chinese descent. So my bad. I thought he was East Indian. So yeah. So this is the topic. Let me share my screen with you guys. And we'll discuss this question. By the way, if you guys want to see a discussion between Camgyverse and his detractors, drop a one in the chat for me. I'll try to organize it in a way where it can still be an interesting show that we all can have a robust conversation behind. So we're gonna watch this video from Camgy, and then we'll discuss. Hopefully, Camgy will come up on the panel by that time, so we can have a well-rounded discussion.
Green, we steady on the rise, digging truth from ancient scenes. We open blinded eyes, rhyme sharp like pirates' lines. We break the bondage tight. Come to speak in revolution, keep the fire burning. The drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide. Our voices thunder loud, politics and history. We stitch them in every verse from Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets. We claim the Kanji verse.
So I want to talk about Ivan Van Sertima and just the many castigations against the legacy of Ivan Van Sertima, who had a very, very seminal work that came before Columbus. Now, this is very controversial because the idea of Africans in the Americas before Columbus basically unseats the supremacy or the false sense of supremacy that Europeans have with respect to, navigation and naval technology. Now, we've spoken ad nauseum on this channel of the many different traditions, from the Wallo Empire to the Mali Empire, the Sawa people, around the Bada of Biafra, the Swahili coast populations, the different populations in the Congo River Basin, who are able to develop advanced naval technologies. We even speak about, Nakau, Hano, and the different traditions of, classical Africans circumnavigating the continent, etc. Right? So the idea that Africans sold or Africans sailed to the United States prior to Europeans is something that is extremely controversial. Now, on the flip side, there are a lot of Tantonites and a lot of reactionaries, certain pretendians who try to promote the idea that Black people have always been in the United States. The Megalayan, infra-Saharan African has always been in the United States, prior to even, the existence of the Native Americans. And they deal with population Y, the Lucia skull, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when it comes to Ivan Van Sertima's scholarship, there are many things that he didn't get quite completely correct, but many individuals are nefarious and they're using some of the flaws of Ivan Van Sertima to speak against African-centered scholarship. And this is absolutely, positively not something that we should promote. Now, when we analyze just, a lot of the unscrupulous, mestizo nationalist, cowardly, vicious, slanderous attacks, not only against Ivan Van Sertima, but against any African researcher who wants to look into the possibilities of African contact into the Americas, we have to understand that this is part of a larger attack against Black people as a whole. And there are a degree of traitors who heavily, criticize the work of African-centered scholars because they want to have a good representation when it comes to white folk. What a lot of these chronologists don't understand is that The African-centered framework gives agency to Black people, to Black researchers, to Black academics, to Black people who are trying to find the truth. This is against the false Western framework that positions Westerners as superior and Africans as inferior. This is what we have tried to fight against. This is what Ivan van Sertima was trying to fight against. Now, again, not every African-centered scholar agreed with Ivan van Sertima. There are certain different pieces of information that even I have, criticized Ivan van Sertima for using, individuals like Barry Fell, who was an expert in sea urchins, in his analysis. It wasn't necessarily a meticulous, methodology with respect to the way that he developed his information, right? So there are a lot of critics that are not acting in good faith and are pushing an agenda against African-centered scholarship, right? See, Ivan van Sertima had advanced degrees in anthropology and linguistics, and he was invited to join UNESCO's International Commission. So those who have said that Ivan van Sertima was not qualified to speak on ancient Mesoamerican history is absolutely false. He definitely was. Now, many individuals have stated that Ivan van Sertima said that, all of the Olmec or all of the Tutushi were African people. And this is not what Ivan van Sertima said, right? This is a straw man argument. According to Ivan van Sertima's own words, and again, Ivan van Sertima directly, responded to the critiques of his work they came before Columbus. He said, I am not asserting that Black or African people are indigenous to any part of the Americas, right? I am not claiming that the Olmecs were African people either. What I am asserting is that there is documented scientific evidence of an African presence among the Olmecs, and there is documented scientific evidence proving there was a major African influence on the Olmec civilization. So again, here, for all of the pretendians and the abos who like to use Ivan van Sertima's work to promote the idea that Black people were indigenous to the Americas, Ivan van Sertima directly rejected that, and he promoted the idea that Black people came from the African continent, especially in the Megalayan era, right? So if we look at the core of his thesis, when we refer to a lot of the phenotypic, aspects, there are stone heads that possess typical phenotypes of indigenous Black African people, and they do not look like Native Americans. Many individuals have claimed that some of the more Africoid looking heads are monkeys, right? But these figures do not resemble monkeys. They resemble Homo sapiens sapiens, right? There is a specific head known as El Negro, and many people say that the El Negro head represents a monkey. If this was a monkey, Mexican museum curators would have named it El Mono, right? And monkeys are not a known part of the Olmec religious pantheon. The Olmec heads represent Olmec rulers and or priests, not gods or animals, right? So now there is the work of the Polish craniologist Roginski, and it found that 13.5% of the skeletons from Tatlico and 4.5% from Cerro de las Mesas was African. Right now, many people may disagree with this analysis. Many people may oppose it, but there has not necessarily been anybody who's replicated the research to prove it incorrect. So the people who want to say that maybe he didn't use the right methodology, they haven't been able to correct a lot of his work. Then we have the Solo dog, right? And this is the Mexican hairless dog found in tombs, which was believed to guide souls to the underworld. And this is a direct parallel to the role of Anpu in ancient Kemet, right? And the Kemetic concept is thousands of years older. And if we look at this dog, it's unlikely that, just the modern variants of this dog that we see in Mexico today, in Mesoamerica today, are related to the ancients, right? So basically, the idea that they're related to these pre-European dogs is pretty unlikely, right? Then you have the feathers versus the braids. There are many scholars who claim that the headgear on the statues represents feathers. However, in most indigenous American sources, feathers are badges of honor and are never hidden under helmets, right? So these these representations are clearly braids with beads. This makes a lot more sense. The idea that they represent feathers is just unfounded, and it doesn't match what we see within the Native American record. So there's a lot of feasibility when it comes to African voyages. There's numerous ancient Kemetic examples of ships, like Khufu's solar boat, found at the Merkut at Giza, Queen Hatshepsut's expedition to Punt, depicted on temple walls. And then you have Herodotus's account of Sesostris or Senusret sailing with a fleet of warships. So obviously, the people who built the pyramids could figure out how to sail the oceans. And there's a caveat with, Ivan van Sertima's analysis, in the sense that he positions it at Nubio Kemet. And there are other scholars like the controversial Clyde Winters, who position the Mande people as the source of the royals among the Tutu-Shi. And Clyde Winters actually goes further, saying that all of the Olmecs were African. And this is not necessarily something that Ivan van Sertima said. But even when we look at the calendrics, the fact that the Tutu-Shi or the Olmecs created the first Mesoamerican calendar, and you have the 365-day solar calendar of Kemet, as a potential source of it, right? And then there's the more controversial findings of cocaine by Svetla Balabanova, right? Traces of nicotine and cocaine in ancient Kemetic mummies, right? Including Hennet Tai, and many have suggested that this is a potential link, a trade link as well, right? The architectural and astronomical evidence, showing the archaeoastronomy of Teotihuacan in Mexico and its astronomical layout aligned with the star Sirius, which was sacred to the ancient Kemites. And then there is a myriad of evidences, a myriad of historical linguistic evidences or potential unity between the so-called mixed Zoc languages, as well as the Paleo-African languages or Niger-Egyptian languages. You have various clusters dealing with water, dealing with rain, liquids, appendages, eyes, and putative correspondences that speak to aerial diffusion or trade between infra-Saharan Africans, most probably the Sahelian West Africans, which makes it an easier route to travel, from Africa to Mesoamerica. So these lexical and, putative, phonological, and morphological correspondences speak to potential aerial diffusion. If we consider the fact that mixed Zoc and Paleo-African are two distinct language families. Now, if they are deeply related, then maybe some of the more controversial individuals like Clyde Winters may have a point. But, the time depth of around, 2,000 to 3,000 years basically suggests some type of sustained trade between the two different civilizations, right? Now, when it comes to the critics, Gabriel Hasler Vieira, right, he has a doctorate in sociology. So many of the people who question the qualifications and the research of Van Sertima, who had advanced degrees in anthropology and linguistics, they're using people like Vieira, whose, area of expertise is not necessarily, anthropology and linguistics with respect to Mesoamerica, right? So, a lot of people are trying to say Van Sertima's work is fringe, but Van Sertima was invited to speak before the U.S. Congressional Committee in 1987. He was invited to defend his thesis at the Smithsonian in 1991, and he was published in a peer-reviewed Smithsonian volume in 1994, Race, Discourse, and the Origin of the Americas, right? So the idea that he's fringe is definitely unfounded. He's well-respected, and even if you disagree, we have to give some sort of leaning to his model because it hasn't been refuted, right? Especially its historical linguistic integrity, right? So there's many other African scholars, Pan-African scholars, who have defended Ivan van Sertima, right? Especially against the likes of critics like Bernard Ortiz de Montellano, right? And Theophile Obenga specifically calls out Montellano for his uncivil and racist attacks and for his dismissive and insulting tone with respect to his analysis of Ivan van Sertima, right? And this is a substitute for genuine scholarly engagement, right? Obenga finds it unjustifiable that the scholar of Van Sertima's stature, a Rutgers professor with doctorates in anthropology and linguistics, is subjected to such personal and ideological vitriol. Obenga directly confronted Montellano's tactic of dismissing Van Sertima's protest, right? And Van Sertima claiming that he doesn't necessarily fall in the Afrocentric camp. But in reality, any Black person who is against racism is going to be classified as an Afrocentrist, right? Now, Van Sertima answered his critics with academic rigor, right? Obanga directed readers to Van Sertima's own published response, reply to my critics in the Journal of Pan-African Studies in Northridge, California, right? So he did not ignore the criticism, but he met it with a point-by-point refutation. And a lot of these Eurocentric and racist critics conveniently overlook this, right? Now, the idea that it's only Afrocentric scholars who have promoted the idea of Africans among the Olmecs is completely false. We have Alfonso Medellin Zenil, who was a Mexican archaeologist. He was a founding researcher of the National Institute of Anthropology and History and the National Museum of Anthropology. He also taught several generations of students at the University of Veracruz, right? And Medellin established a chronological sequence for the Totonac culture. And he conducted fieldwork on the island of Sacrifices, where he discovered the Totonac artifacts. Now, according to this scholar, true Negroes, the true Negro physical type was represented among the Tutushi, or the Olmecs. Then we have Gonzalo Aguirre Beltran, right? And this was a Mexican anthropologist known for his studies of marginal populations. His work focused on Afro-Mexican and indigenous populations. He was a director of the National Indigenous Institute and as assistant secretary for popular culture and continuing education. He was responsible for forming government policy towards indigenous populations. So not only was this a researcher, this was a government official, right? And he is very important in the field of applied anthropology. According to this scholar, he did not reject the idea of Negroids or Black people among the Olmec population, right? Then we have Carlo, T.E. Gray, whose work on Xochitl figures led him to conclude that the Olmec ancestry was probably not Mongoloid, right? And Carlo is a historian known for his research work on pre-Columbian art and archaeology of Mexico, particularly the Olmec or Tutushi art and the Mezcala culture of the Guerrero region. So he's saying they probably were not of Mongoloid origin, right? And this is affirming the fact that there are numerous scholars who wouldn't be considered, Afrocentrists, who have promoted the idea that the Olmecs definitely potentially had either Negroid or African origins. So Montillano's selected bibliography reveals a biased agenda rather than a pursuit of the truth, right? So we have to understand this. And Obanga situated Van Sertima in the defense of Van Sertima as an affirmation of African agency against the biased Eurocentric and flawed criticism against the framework that African-centered scholars seek to present. So with respect to this, yes, there's definitely evidence, to substantiate and support, Ivan Van Sertima's claims. We just have to be more willing to examine that evidence and not just take what the critics of African-centered scholars say at face value, right? This is very, very important in terms of understanding just the integrity and the value of our great scholars, right? And whether it's writing, whether it's, their theology, theogony, whether it's some of the correspondences with language, it's obvious that Africans played a very, very prominent role just in, the existence and the development of all of the different, civilizations of the world, right? And it's very, very clear, just the fact that, Africans have always consistently played a prominent role in the development of world civilizations. So in defense of the great scholar Ivan Van Sertima, that's all I got for y'all on this one. Hope to get you on the next one. Peace.
Let's go to Karma Green, we steady on the rise. Digging truth from ancient scenes, we open the blinded eyes. Rhyme sharp like Pyrus lines, we break the bondage tight. Come you speaking revolution, keep the fire burning. Trumpet drums guide our stride, we march with purpose proud. No more silence, we collide, our voices thunder loud. Politics and history, we stitch them in every verse. From Pharaoh's throne to Yaoundé streets, we claim the Kanji verse.
Try to play most of that outro so you guys could see some good AI at work there. Well, a lot of you had comments in the chat. I see our boy Real Black Gentleman is out there saying greetings, people. I'm gonna put it in the chat, but I'll say here too, is Kamji still here? Because some folks have some questions that you would be better, way better than me at answering. This is not my area at all. But yeah, a lot of commentary in the chat. You guys keep the comments coming. We'll try to play off some of the things that we see out there. Cam G is still here. Cam G, if you can, come up on the panel so that we could have a full discussion. Let me mix it up this time. Let me start with Buana this time. Buana, what say you to what you just saw?
Cam G verse is the new. He's the new Ivan Van Sertima, and that's a big title to bestow on him. But he has an expertise in terms of the things that he is discussing, and I think that I told Cam G verse this earlier. I think that he should try to become a public intellectual like Ivan Van Sertima, and I have reasons for saying that, but I don't. I know when he does that, there's gonna be a whole lot of heat on him. So my advice to him was to try to make sure that he is economically comfortable before he starts his rounds, because the onus is on the new generation of intellectuals to carry on to traditions of the people, the ancestors who have passed. But me personally, I have several questions for Cam G, because some of the things that I hear out in these YouTube streets have not been answered. In particular, Sanetta, Sanetta and Ankh, and a whole lot of them like to disparage Ivan Van Sertima. But I've read They Came Before Columbus, but I've also read his response to his critics, and this is left out of the conversation when they try to discredit Ivan Van Sertima. They don't talk about the fact that before he died, he responded point for point in terms of his critics, and that is missing from the discussion. But there are several things. There are things I want to know from Cam G. He talked about the cocaine that was found in the bodies of mummies, and I would like to first know how they answered. How is it that the flora and fauna from South America got into the bodies of mummies in Africa? That's the first thing. The next thing is Thor Heyerdahl. Thor Heyerdahl proved that it was possible to travel from, I think, the coast of West Africa, maybe Camji could correct me, into the Caribbean seas. So if they had the ability to do that, of course, he was proving that navigation was possible from one from one area to another area through currents and these kinds of things. Another thing too is the architecture of the Aztecs. I think, Huitzilopochtli, they had it was like a Egyptian pyramid. It was like a pyramid, and the purpose it served, it was very similar to the pyramids in Egypt in terms of the priests being in control of that territory, that specific structure itself. That's the other thing. Lastly, I don't know if Camji getting all of this, but lastly, the question I had is, how does the scholars deal with El Negro? Because when I see El Negro, I am seeing a black statue. For me, it's very difficult to get around that. So I'm asking myself, what is that doing there? If the predominant people in that society don't look like that, don't have the whole facial structure of that particular structure, how did that get there? What does that say? And I'm curious about how the scholars dealt with that. So these are the questions I had for him. If I don't know if he's on, or if he's even hearing what I have to say. But that's the questions I had.
No, I'm right here.
Before throwing it, real quick, before throwing it to Camji, do you have any comments about what you saw, or in relation to the prompt?
No, my only question is the obscurantists, the people who get engaged in these ridiculous claims, is the amount of people who's in this part of the world. Because when I hear Ivan Van Sertima talk, Ivan Van Sertima try to make it clear in terms of the influence of the Africans who probably would have gotten to this part of the world, not the numbers. The Dane Callaways of the world would make it seem like there were millions Africans or black people in this side of the world. And I know that's ridiculousness, but I'm saying that in terms of numbers, how many people it actually reached this side of the world in terms of how they could be so influential in where the indigenous people were to want to build structures or even try to create their own monuments to these people who probably would have come here. What's the numbers looking like? So those are my questions in terms of watching the video.
Camji, usually I have the anchor of a topic go last, but because Buana started off with these questions, I'll let you go. So how are you this week, Camji?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Yeah, I wasn't expecting
Yes,
you to have the show today, but it's cool. There was a lot there, and I will say that before I go too deep, this topic is very, very difficult for most Black people because most Black people don't know how to think beyond the boundaries that white people set up. That's number one. So, you know, one of the more common detractions that I get about this topic that shows that most people aren't really thinking that much is the incoherence between the chronological period of Abubakari's voyage in the 14th century and the Epiomic culture, 12 to 4th or 12 to 13th to 5th century BCE. One is a BCE culture and the other is a common era culture. But Sertima's book, They Came Before Columbus book, he describes a very large chronological time span that, you know, goes from the Paleolithic to the pre-colonial period. So just that one limitation of the contact model to the 14th century shows that a lot of Negroes who approach this topic are not reading or thinking at all. So I'll leave it with that, and I'll let everybody give their input before I go deeper.
Sure thing. Sister Cheryl, what say you? All right, maybe Cheryl stepped away. So I'll go to Black Seal. Black Seal, Ivan Van Sertima gets a lot of disrespect today due to pretendians, but there seems to be some truth here. Are there any objections to his claims, Camdy's claims, or Van Sertima's claims, with counter evidence? What say you, Black Seal?
So I've read. I do actually have a copy of his book, Came Before Columbus. Right. I don't know. I think that I wasn't aware of some of the ways he his counter evidence. I think I'd like to at least learn a little bit more about that. There are a lot of people who, when he read his book, he talked about the king of Mali who sailed into the east and never returned. And I guess he talked about that in his book, but it's been a very long time since I've read it. I'm open to hearing any and all information about this topic because I'll admit I'm not as informed as I would like to be personally. So, but I do accept the fact that African people, were explorers as well, and they traveled to all parts of the globe. I could definitely understand that, but I'll leave it there. Those are just my thoughts on it.
Sure thing. So, Camdy, this is what I don't know if you heard me when I teed up this conversation earlier. Cheryl, I'll come to you in a second. A lot of us are not as adept to this information. So, to do a whole shoot the breeze on the topic would be, I can do it, but you would have to organize like all those detractors I saw you had on Twitter this past week or two. If you can get them to say, yes, we'll come and have this.
They won't come. I'll just tell you right now, they won't come. Because they're not interested in a scholarly conversation. Their conversation is more ideological, and their ideology is against the Abos and the Pretendians. So they don't know how to have an intelligent conversation on this topic. That's why none of them will ever come on the show. But if
Gotcha.
you could
All right.
find
Well,
like maybe Kofi or someone who's a skeptic, someone who's a skeptic from the server or from any other server, maybe that might be interesting. But you can't necessarily deal with an ideologue, because if you deal with an ideologue, you'll never be able to have an intelligent conversation.
well stated. Okay. So we'll have to table that for now. But if we can ever get a few of the naysayers, I know Kofi would be willing to come. He was in the chat earlier. I don't know where he is now. But yeah, I would like to have a topic or two back to back where we can kind of discuss it and actually have a chance to walk us through it like we were 5 years old and really break it down. But I think Sister Cheryl is here. Let Cheryl go, and then after that, Kofi. I'm sorry, Kamji, you'll go next. So, Sister Cheryl, what say you?
Yeah, so yeah, like with Ivan Van Sertima, back like when I was in grad school, can't remember exactly what, but I had to do a project on Ivan Van Sertima. It was just very brief. What I find is that I think somebody mentioned it in the chat too. A lot of African Americans in particular like to try to cling to this idea that we were here before um before anyone else, like we weren't part of the transatlantic slave trade, and so I kind of err on the side of caution with this with black people, because yeah, we like to say we're from everywhere. We like to say we're Afro-Asiatic. We like to say, oh yeah, we got the Ainu in Japan. We like to say we're from here, we're from there. And that's all great and all, but our ancestors came from the transatlantic slave trade. And I think when black people do this, I think they unintentionally and unconsciously try to distance themselves from the continent. And we kind of go down this rabbit hole where it doesn't mean that these ancient places didn't have access or contact with African people. It doesn't mean that. Um, there very well could have been some trade going on back then. There could have been some traveling over the oceans. That could have happened. But to say that that is the reason why, like people, like someone in the chat did say Dane Calloway, he uses this to kind of like connect himself as being a part of the land, um that is what we call America. But it's highly far-fetched, especially if your family was a part of the original 13 colonies. It's highly unlikely that you were part of that that flow, that influx of black people that may have been in the area where the Olmecs were at that time. It's highly unlikely, especially if you're Philadelphia, all up and down the East Coast. It's not likely. And if you're in the South, Atlanta, Mississippi, Alabama, it's not. It's highly unlikely that that was you. But you can still make the claim that black people have done trade with people. That's totally admissible. But I mean, we kind of stretch it and we go down this rabbit hole, and I think we need to sometimes we just need to refocus. So I'll just leave it there.
Appreciate that, Sister Cheryl in the chat. Sister Raw is in the chat saying greetings. Sister Raw, we had a topic earlier. You could probably catch up in the playback. We had a topic that was directly addressed to you. So make sure to check that out. Man, with that said, Cameron, you've heard everything everyone else had to say. You see what the chat is talking about. Break it all down to us like we're 5 so that we can come to the conclusion that you have come to.
Well, I can't see the chat currently. But as I said before, it's important to separate the ideology or the perspective aspect of it from what actually is seen, what's documented, what we have evidence for, right? Because I use the term framework, and the framework basically puts you centered in location and time. I think Bwana, he was talking about being from the Bahamas. And, we're here in the United States, which is an interesting country because Black people here, most Black people can't really trace, past the brick wall, 1870. Pre 1870, most families don't really have direct records of who they are, right? For a myriad of reasons, slavery notwithstanding. But whether or not, Black people in America can trace descendancy to different populations throughout history, be it the Olmecs or, the Ainu or the Andaman Islanders, whether or not that's happening doesn't necessarily have any bearing on the documentary evidence that we have at our disposal, right? So the video you saw was more introductory, but we can demonstrate on many different domains, whether it's dealing with pathogens or sickness, mealworm, threadworm, roundworm, whether you're dealing with fauna or plants, you talk about cotton, Gossypium hirsutum, that's in Cape Verde. It's a Mexican breed found in Cape Verde in 1466, and it got to Cape Verde from West Africa. Whether you're dealing with place names, the large variety of place names in linguistics, it's called onomastics. But we deal with place names, and these are the names that people call places that they identify with, right? Whether you're dealing with, Yorktown in the UK and in New York, or Amsterdam and New Amsterdam, New England for those in Connecticut, Massachusetts, etc. New Spain, former New Spain is Florida today, in various parts of America. So place names also show us this. Not to mention, different skeletal remains according to, the General Service Administration, official government documents. There's a skeleton in the 13th century in the US Virgin Islands where you see prominent African affinities. Guadarrama's analysis of Tatalico is a follow-up of Roginski. And Guadarrama, when he looked at the populations of Tatalico in Mexico, Olmec area, a population that is believed to have had the She or the Olmec immigrants, he sees predominant, African features like dolichocephalism or long heads, the morphology or the shape that you see among inter-African populations. He observes this, in that Tatalico remain. And this is not something that's new. This is something that has been seen, throughout history, Mexican, archaeological history, this documentary evidence of contact, right? Even if you were to go to some of the epigraphy, Morenz et al.'s analysis, Hampade Ba's analysis, Moncayo's analysis, Haynes, et al.'s analysis, showing Manding letters in the Mohara stele, in the Tuxtla stele. And the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. So the trained scholars on this issue, they're responsible for presenting evidence. Now, they do come from a framework, and the frameworks are important, whether, you're an Aborigine or whatever, whether you want to say that you come from this tribe or whatever motives you have, right? The methodology and the structure that you're using to be able to discern knowledge is definitely important. The usage of primary sources, understanding what a primary source is. Trained scholars, like we call it in Africology, Africana studies, these are Black scholars with agency who are trained to be able to get this information, to be able to find this information, right? And they exist to support, the brothers and sisters on the show and, everybody in the community who wants to know more about who we actually are as a people. But as I said, ideology notwithstanding, the history of racism and slavery notwithstanding, because we definitely can't separate the environment from the experience of Black folk. But when we're trained and when we're focused, we gotta, don't take our eyes off the evidence, don't take our eyes off of what has been documented, and don't take our eyes off of what we can demonstrate and prove. So that's kind of generally it. I mean, that's like a brief synopsis of it. Now, if we want to go into particular details with any field that I just mentioned, we can.
So you use the example of Sierra Leone. I think it was Cape Verde actually. You said that they had Mexican species of cotton.
Yeah,
and that comes
Gossapium
from actually
hirsutum.
West Africa.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
Gossapium hirsutum. Yeah.
right. So tell us about the cultural exchanges then between the Olmec civilization and say West African civilization. Food, is it language?
Well, there's
etc.
both. I mean, yeah, there's both. Sertima mentioned bakoko, and this is a lexical item or a vocab word that Montiano, Hazaviera, Barber, the individuals from the Current Anthropology 1997 forum, they disputed that. But Roger Blench actually, reconstructed among various African populations, Koko. And we certainly know about the nominative ba used in, so-called Bantu languages. So Bakoko would be an example of that. Kani or Guani, which you see among the Taino populations, you see it in Costa Rica, this gold copper alloy, right? We have some commonalities with that phrase. And generally speaking, there's a scholar by the name of Neder Neb. He's the one who pointed me to this area. The fact that, in linguistics, there's what's called aerial diffusion or contact or borrowing between West Africans and Mesoamericans before Columbus. And that basically shows that they were trading to a degree, and basically sharing ideas and sharing items. Now, again, as I mentioned before, a lot of the deceptive practices, of some of these scholars from the CA Forum is they'll try to limit the contact model to the 14th century, or they'll try to say that anything that happened before Abubakari in 1311 invalidates this model. But, Van Sertima and many other scholars, many other Africological scholars, they laid out a large time span. So there's a lot of history from the Paleolithic time until now where various exchanges took place. Another example is in Ile Ife, the pavement on Ile Ife. We have corn impressions on the pottery sherds because what they did is they took pottery and they crushed the pottery as part of their pavement mixture. Anybody who's in the construction industry, about the relationship between Portland cement and concrete. It was actually, my field. But when you look at Ile Ife, you see impressions on the pottery of Z maize. Z maize or corn is predominantly an American species, an American fauna. And you see that in Ile Ife in the Yoruba culture before Columbus's voyage. It's obvious that in numerous fields, genetics, linguistics, epigraphy, the writing orthography, commonalities from the Swahili coast with the schematic geometric amorphous drawings of Felix Chami. You see some of the same letters in West Africa, and you see some of the same inscriptions in the Tuxtla and the Mojera stele in Mesoamerica. And the list goes on and on. It's obvious that there's just numerous areas and evidences of contact beyond just the technological ability of Africans. And I'll leave you with this on this point. Western scholars today, they say that the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Viking, they navigated to the Americas. The Asiatic or the Pacific Islander, right? And for many people who say that the Olmecs look like the Samoans, and Ibn Van Sertima's follow-up, which is African presence in early America, he actually mentions, Australian Aborigines and Melanesians sailing to the Americas as early as 25,000 years ago and 15,000 years ago, respectively, for the Negritos, deep in the Paleolithic time. So Sertima's model includes the possibility and reality that many of the Black people in Mesoamerica came from the Pacific, right? And if you go deeper into this, right, you can see the many like the myriad of correspondences. And it's really easy to get lost in it. But at the same token, I think it's important for us to be respectful for what our scholars actually proposed and wrote down, right? Be absolutely respectful, because when it comes to the nautical technology, right? Or the ability of intelligence. Most Western scholars, again, they'll say that the Europeans, they made it to the Americas. The Asians and the Pacific Islanders, they made it to the Americas. Rats and monkeys, they sailed from Africa to the Americas. Seals, they took tuberculosis from Africa and they sailed to the Americas. Thor Heyerdahl and Lindemann, German and Norwegian scholar respectively, they used traditional African boats to sail from Morocco, in the case of Thor Heyerdahl, who made it to Barbados, and Sierra Leone, right, who made it to the Americas in about 50 or so days. White men in traditional African boats made it to the Americas, but black people from Africa could not do what white men in traditional African boats, monkeys and rats, as well as whites and Asians did. Now, make that make sense.
Good points there. You know, I saw you post about the seal. So seals from the continent brought tuberculosis to the New World. I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
they scholars posit that seals, along the coast of Africa, were infected with tuberculosis, because they looked at the strain of tuberculosis in seals and they saw that it was closely related to human strains. So they posit that when they analyze it in Peru and other places in the Americas, that this African strain must have been brought, to the Americas by seals. And you'll find that these Westerners, again, they'll say that monkeys and rats sailed from Africa across the Atlantic and made it to the Americas. They see African genes in the monkeys and rats species of the Americas. And they'll say seals did it. And the seals are sea creatures. They'll say seals brought these human pathogens over, but they don't feel comfortable saying that black people had the ability to do it, even though white men in traditional African boats did it. It's obvious that they're biased. Obvious.
Black Steel had to drop off. Black Steel, I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. We won't be live next week. But one last question from me to Kamji, which I find fascinating. So, two questions. The Olmecs, who we believe have African origins, right? Are they all of African origin or some was of African origin?
Well, I mean, Sertima's model, the contact model and the approach says that their presence was there, right? If we consider Wyszynski's analysis, he puts it at 14% of the skeletons that he examined had that. He used equatorial and Dongolan type taximetric approach, which people who disagree, the same people who disagree with Wyszynski with respect to Olmecs, you see them Bantuid, Congoid, Niloid, and using all types of taximetric methodologies to describe African populations today, to delineate, different African populations today. Guadarrama, his different type in Tatalico was about 40%. So it was like a large minority would represent, the prognathism and dolichocephalicism or long skullness that you see in the so-called true Negro type. Scholars like Clyde Winters, which I say is controversial because he's probably the only open FBA scholar. He would actually say that all of these people were black and that they came from Paleolithic times from Africa. And you could differentiate him from Dane. Dane basically says that black people were aliens or came from the sky or whatever. Like they just go all the way to the deep end. But to answer your question, I would say safely, I could say a minority. But the primary point is there was contact, and we have physical remains showing Africans in the Americas. We have epigraphy, showing Africans in the Americas. So the number, or to the degree that we came, pretty immaterial, honestly. We're just trying to demonstrate the technological plausibility and the fact that we were there, and we demonstrated that.
Okay, cool. So that That answers that question. So last thing, if you can, for me, if you can describe which African peoples were the ones who made contact, and describe the boats that they made, because no one ever talks about the boats that Africans would have made. I read somewhere that they were like almost like basket woven boats. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and that's interesting because this goes back to like the limits of Anglocentrism or English only sources, because there's actually a myriad of sources who speak about the watercraft. Now there is one English source, Robert Smith, that comes to mind, and he actually speaks about West African sailboats. A lot of people, when they talk about sailboats, they talk about ancient Kemet, they may talk about the Swahili coast, but in West Africa, from the Yoruba people all the way up to Senegambia, they used a raffia palm and threads to basically build their sails, woven threads and woven palm fibers, palm textiles to build their sails. And then they eventually would adopt sails or cloth sails from the colonial period. But the Senegambians, the Wallo people, are extremely important in this because they have an extensive tradition of uh, mariners, star travel, star mapping, an extensive tradition. And the Niani Empire, Niani would be the name of the Malian Empire, in the decades prior to Abubakari's 14th century, early 14th century voyage, they actually gained dominion over the Senegambian coast. So many of the Mule mariners would have been in their domain. They would have had access to the Loco and Gal ships, which would have been 20 meters, 65 or so feet, 8 feet across with a hull maybe about 4 to 5 feet high. Those are the Loco. The Spaniards called them Almadia ships or dugout canoes. And, in the most primitive version of that, that's what Lindemann used to basically travel, from Sierra Leone to the Americas. This German scholar in the 1950s. It took him about 52 days, right? But the evidence shows that they actually had, structures, sails, what Europeans may call the caravel, according to Pathé Diang. Like the caravel of the Europeans is based upon a Senegambian prototype, right? So the Senegambians would be a major ethnic group, and by extension, the Mali or Niani Empire and all of the ethnic groups associated with that. The Songhai, according to Tomowski, he's a Polish scholar, Dr. Tomowski, as well as Kamugisha in the Journal of Caribbean History, the Songhai had ships built from timber by the Sorko people, the Sorko fisherman class. And these ships were very, very large. They could carry cargo up to 70 tons, right? They were really, really large ship, 25 to 30 meters, similar to the Mbana ship of the Senegambian people, which is about 30 meters, 10 foot across and 5 or so feet of hull height. And these ships had the ability to carry, massive amount of tons. And the Songhai Empire, as well as the Niani Empire, actually had administrative offices where they managed the construction of these ships and the riverine trade, right? Now, on the riverine trade point, because you had many different populations like the Yoruba, the Igbo, the Igala, the Nupe, who had shipbuilding traditions, but they weren't necessarily seafaring ships, and they weren't necessarily ships of large capacity, according to the evidence that I've read, right? And a lot of the detractors, they'll try to claim that African nautical vessels are limited to rivers, but they misunderstand the fact that there's oceanic rivers. So by definition, if you have a ship on the African continent who could withstand adverse geology, right? Especially geology that scholars like Thomas Sowell claim prevents the ability of African people to make ships. So if you have ships that could withstand adverse riverine, geology, they could definitively withstand oceanic rivers. I mean, it just goes without saying, right? But to go on to extension, the Mina people of the Gold Coast, you have a city called Coromante, and onomastically that could be connected to the Garamantes. The Garamantes being the North African and Sahelian populations who built ships contemporaneous with the Phoenicians, part of, Van Sertima's contact model. These Agawa people, these Kanem people, Amazigh people, obviously in Northern Africa, like the Tuareg, you have the Luango people who, with the Mina people that I previously mentioned, of the port city of Coromante, according to Robert Smith and his analysis, they were able to build ships that could travel up to 3 to 4 months from the Gold Coast of Ghana to Angola. So they were able to travel there and back with sailboats, right? And the Fanti people and the Mina people, they were known by Europeans to be able to conduct trade deep out into the coast. Because a lot of, them white folks, they were getting scared because they were getting beat in a lot of the revolts, the ship revolts. So they started to manage trade where they may show up like 20, 30, 40 miles off the coast and ask, one of the African boats to, sail out and give them merchandise, right? And the last thing I'll say on this, Swahili, I don't want to miss any. Swahili, ancient Kemet, the Somalis clearly, obviously had this. I mentioned Angola, the Congo Kingdom had this as well. And the speed. One thing that's missing is the speed and the ability of, different African populations like the Mole Mariners to understand these currents and understand seasons of when to travel. They prefer to travel in the spring because they knew that there would be calmer winds in that North Atlantic gear loop or that current loop. Some of these ships, these Mbana ships, even the Loco and Gal ships that navigated across the Atlantic, and these were fleets, right? They could travel up to 100 leagues a day, right? Which is 300 or so miles, depending on where you are with respect to latitude and longitude. That's comparable to modern oceanic speeds in traffic, albeit these are larger steamboats, with a lot of metallic components. So structurally that makes them heavier, but still it's pretty fascinating that these timber boats, right, as well as the Buduma papyrus reed boats that Thor Heyerdahl used, right? Some of these boats were able to travel as far as 100 leagues a day, and at top speeds, you can make it from West Africa to Mesoamerica in about 30 to 45 days, according to Dr. Pate Diop. So that's pretty incredible. And again, the Pan-Africanists in name only, or Panos as I like to call them, they have to stop negating the technical capabilities of African societies before European contact, simply because they want to oppose pretendians. I mean, it's possible to walk and chew gum at the same time. You can be meticulous with respect to your analysis while not falling for, illegitimate propaganda. So that's all I got on that.
Appreciate that, Carmen G. Let me throw it to my remaining panelists. If there's any thoughts or questions you guys would have, let's start with Buana.
Yeah, definitely. I have several questions. As far as currents, because I live on an island that's surrounded by water, I understand the strength of currents, and the if you understand currents, you understand how it can be manipulated in terms of sea travel. So usually, sometimes when you hear these kinds of discussions, these are people who are landlocked and don't understand the current the ocean potential in current usage. But let me first start here, because the first question I have is in terms of architecture in Mexico. In terms of the Aztecs, the buildings are structured very similar to pyramids. That's the first question I have, and I would like you to explain what the dispute is, because they're so similar in structure. That's the first thing. The second thing is dealing with the idea of El Negro. El Negro is a structure that I don't know how that got there, and I would like to know what the dispute is in terms of the scholarship and how they deal with that question. The third question I have is, you mentioned the term of Guinea gold. Some people don't realize that some gold is different, and Guinea gold or gold from Africa is particular to that region in terms of being different from gold found in the Western world. And the fact that someone could use that term and definition, they had familiarity with the gold itself to know that there was a distinctive difference between the two. But the last question I have, I don't know if you're getting all this down, Camji. The last question I have is the Andaman Islands, because the discussion is from some quarters here is these people are not necessarily African people. So my question to you is, whether you consider them African people, and if they are African people, which part of Africa did they come from, and how did they traverse from Africa into the Indian areas of the world? That's the 4 questions. I don't know if you got all that.
Yeah, I think I missed the first question, but you asked about the Andaman Islanders, you asked about the gold, you asked about Monument F, and what was the first question?
Monument F, El Negro,
Yeah.
and then the pyramid structure of the
For the
Aztecs.
pyramids. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
the
Yes,
Aztec.
sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like again, this is another area where a lot of the current on anthropology 1997. And all of y'all should get familiar with that current on anthropology because literally 100% of the detractors get their arguments from there. Like it's like word for word type of situation. But they try to say that, oh, the Teotihuacan is thousands of years later, so it couldn't necessarily be related to, the Nubio-Kemetic civilization. But architectonically, some of the same pyramid structures that you see in the Sahel in Western Africa, they bear relationship to that which you see in classical Africa. And these civilizations are separated by thousands and thousands of years. Now, I wouldn't necessarily posit that the Mesoamericans were taught, by the Africans per se, even though it is possible. But I think that they came from a common root that, deified platforms. And you even see a glyph of a pyramid in the epigraphy of the Epi-Olmec culture, right? They deified the concept of a mound or the concept of, divine birth, through the earth. That was a deified concept in these cultures, which is why you see, so many pyramid structures arise, not only in Mexico, but in China. You see different mound traditions, tumuli traditions in the Americas. You see tumuli traditions in West Africa, right? So that's what I would say. And I will admit, I haven't necessarily gone too deep on the history of structural development in the Aztecs as it relates to the Epi-Olmecs, and that would kind of be ironic considering my field of expertise. But I wouldn't posit it. I would say that it's a possibility. Now with Monument F, first they try to say that Monument F or El Negro, like they literally call it Black Man. The museum curators literally call it Black Man, right? They say that it's a monkey. I've never seen a monkey with a high top fade or big lips, right? Big protruding lips with a defined philtrum, right? They say that that's a monkey, even though monkeys are not part of the Tutushi or Olmec divine pantheon, right? So that's out of the picture. If it's a monkey, they would call it El Mono. They wouldn't call it Black Man. I mean, if they called a monkey Black Man, that's actually pretty racist. Like that's racist on the other end. Like you name a depiction that you're calling a monkey Black Man. That's what these people are claiming, right? Now, other individuals, I've heard this claim as well. Oh, it was black because it was dark when they excavated it, which the physical evidence from the pictures doesn't show that. And Monument F is no more darker than any of the other basalt heads when they're excavated. So that actually falls apart. But more importantly, if you examine a scholar by the name of Dr. David Kelly, right? Dr. David Kelly from the University of Canterbury, he actually analyzes the cornrows or the trichology, the hairstyles of the basalt heads, and he identifies the philtrum, as I discussed earlier, as something that's predominant within African sculpturing traditions. And he even added the caveat that this isn't something that's Melanesian, right? So if you were to claim that, the Olmec heads predominantly represent Melanesians, that hairstyle and philtra sculpting isn't something that's necessarily prominently seen within those cultures, as, Dr. David Kelly brilliantly put. So that's the deal with Monument F. Right, now we talk about the Andaman Islanders. I think there was another question before that, before the Andaman Islanders.
Yeah, it's the Guinea gold. The Guinea
The
gold.
Guinea gold. Yeah, the Guinea gold. Okay, that's another controversial one. The Guinea gold, because there is linguistic, regularity with respect to the ways that Africans define gold and the ways that indigenous people define gold. You even find some place names in Panama with names like Mandinka that people try to say are, post-Columbian, but these are terms used by the indigenous people, not necessarily the Garifunas or the so-called Afro Panamanians per se, right? Now, there's a scholar by the name of Holland, and I'm actually in the process, as we're doing this video, I'm in the process of making just like short follow-up videos, just to post some of the latest research and evidence that I've been able to compile. And there's a scholar by the name of Holland who spoke at a colloquium in Ulsa, and she analyzed some of these gold and other metallurgical implements, and she found characteristics that were similar to slag or siderolithic metallurgy in Western Africa. And that would basically be a nail in the coffin on the behalf of the metallurgical or gold argument, because if chemically you can see characteristics that are more common in West African slag, you can't say that it didn't come from West Africa. That would be more like indisputable archaeological evidence. So that's it with the gold. I'm in the process of validating this stuff, and like the members of my channel and Patreon are going to be able to see that. And then last but not least, the Andaman Islanders. I mean, that's the perfect ending point, because literally they got to their location, the Andaman Islanders and the Australian Aborigines, by sailing from Africa. So if you want to say that Africans couldn't cross the oceans before Columbus, how did Andaman Islanders and Australian Aborigines get to their current location? They literally crossed the ocean, and they had simple canoes, but they literally crossed the ocean from Africa. So
hold on, KMG. So just to be clear, it's your view that these are African people.
Their ancestors came from African, and when you say African, we could be specific. Like when I use the term Megalayan, I'm talking about 4.2 thousand years to present, right? Cambone, Obadale Cambone spoke about tens of hundreds and the thousands with respect to when your diaspora left Africa. Was it a decade ago? Was it 100 years ago? Was it 1,000 years ago? Right? 10,000, 100,000 years ago, right? So we could put some context about who we define as African and who we define as Black. I wouldn't say a Fijian isn't Black if they define themselves as Black, or a Melanesian isn't Black. And historically, with respect to precedent, even if you look at the UNIA, John Maynard, right, who was a leader of the Black Fellows of the UNIA. You had Dravidian, people within the UNIA, Dravidian branches of the UNIA. There's this funny page on X called Zargos Neolithic or something like that. And he looks at some of the people within southern India who actually look more similar to Andaman Islanders. And he talks about how like those are the indigenous ancient Indians. I think it's pretty funny. But there were different Black populations who were unified on a global front against imperialism that existed in antiquity. So there's evidence that we've actually been able to successfully organize with this. Now, I know Abos and Pretendians, they like to cling, Clyde Winters and David Imhotep, they were the ones who promoted the YALU polymorphism or Yap marker being in the Fuegians in Patagonia in South America. And I wasn't really able to corroborate that independently. But there's going to be people who take advantage of this stuff and do all types of, because a lot of folks don't know how to deal with nuance and context. I think I saw that comment in the chat. But again, if we're trained and we're structured and we have an organization, none of that will matter. We'll just get the job done. So long story short, I would say, yes, they are in certain context, but there's also certain spaces where, we should more so deal with our home local front as opposed to being, so international. We got to get certain things in order locally before we could step to the international stage. And I hope I answered all your questions effectively.
I would like to I don't want to step on your toes, Koku. I wanted to ask my brother Kamji a question.
Well, let me introduce you first. I mean, well, before I introduce Kofi, real quick, did Kamji address the pyramids question?
No, he did a good job, and really he put the onus on us to do more research. But I really wanted him to, in particular, this was a point of contention with Kofi on the last discussion we had. So I really wanted him and Kofi to have a back and forth, in particular with this particular issue of the Andaman Islanders and the Aborigines in Australia. So I'll just let them have it.
Wait. What is the point of
All right. Well,
contention
that said,
exactly?
let's welcome in.
I'm not aware of the point of contention because I don't.
Well, Kofi will tell you. Kofi will tell you right now. Kofi, how are you this week?
Doing good, doing good. Glad to be back on the panel. Good to hear you again. And again, my condolences to you, Koku.
I appreciate it.
Basically, yeah. Kamji, I really admire you, brother. You put in a lot of work. I'm gonna say that you put in more work in than I have with this particular subject, right? So my contention is not to undermine what you're doing, not at all. What you're doing is spectacular and I love it. But with that same mind, when it comes to archaeology and when it comes to genetics, there's certain things is I see what you're trying to connect the dots for certain things, but there are several missing links there. So I'll start from what Buana was saying. So it's been a thing people are saying, well, of course, look at the Aztecs, the Mayas, and the Incas. Look, they have pyramids. The pyramids there are not the same pyramids in Egypt, right? They're much smaller, one, and there's steps on there, right? Even some places in America, right? Like the Folsom people, they even call that pyramids, but it's not a pyramid, it's a mound, right? So when we say pyramids, we was really talking about a shape of a structure, right? But the largest pyramid is the pyramid of Giza. It's not on the same scale, and the architecture is different. The only thing similar is that it has the shape of a pyramid. That's it. You know, so even if you go to the ones in Sudan, further south of that, they're much more on a smaller scale. They're more resemble the ones that's in Egypt due to the shape and their structure, even though they're much smaller on a smaller scale. So when there's what we will call a quote unquote pyramid in China, right? But it's not, again, it's not the same as the pyramid in Egypt. So that's one. Two, something I'm glad you brought context to that, because a lot of people here on this panel and other places, they like to run with it and want to kind of put a pin in that when he asked you about the people from, I'm not sure it was from the Solomon Islands and the Aborigines. So when you said, well, yeah, of course, Africans had the capability, and Ivy Van Sertima pretty much proved that with marine biology and maritime science, that the Africans had that. But you said that, yes, they were able to get there, right? But then Buana was like, whoa, so you're saying they're Africans? And you contextualize that, well, no, it took these people thousands of years. Now, what I would add is that then they're no longer African in that sense, because it didn't take 1, 2, 3 generations. It took these people thousands of years to get there. They didn't just leave, I don't know, West Africa and sail off of the coast of Zimbabwe or something like that, and or Madagascar, and just sail directly to Australia in 1 or 2 generations. No, that did not happen, because we can see that when it comes to genetics of the people of who they are. And the reason why I would say that when you test these people that you guys quote Black, aka African, I'm pretty sure they have Neanderthal DNA. And you know, Kamji, that all humans outside the continents of Africa have Neanderthal DNA. And I'm pretty sure if you look, you test the Jarawa people, the Native Americans, all these people had Neanderthal DNA, not your classical African. The last point I'm going to make, and I think you and I were talking about on the Discord, everyone get to the Discord. I commend you. You put a lot of work in. I'm not trying to undermine your work. You did an excellent job. My only thing that I would say is that we don't have an Olmec body to take a DNA sample from. We do not have an Olmec body to excavate from. But we can come to the conclusion that there are probably a small group of Africans that went to Mesoamerica, right, that established that civilization there in the Yucatan Peninsula. But we don't know without a shadow of a doubt that it is that 100%. It's not that ironclad. You know what I'm saying? I would say it's looking like 85% that yes, we are on the money. So that's my take on the whole thing.
Okay, I think I agreed with the majority of what you said, particularly like, and that's why I added context, talking about these different groups of Black people around the world or African people that migrated from Africa and settled into the different regions of the world, right? Genetics, and this is one caveat about genetics. Genetics has a lot of bias, right? So we have to always contextualize it and externally corroborate it. An example of that is like if you look at some of the evidence I posted from Harvard's Allen Ancient DNA database, which sequenced research from Kipson and Becerra and different research showing, B haplotypes, paternal haplotypes in pre-Columbian Mexico, right, and Belize, right? You can clearly see that under certain rigorous sequences, there's going to be African haplotypes that come up. And this is largely because a lot of these companies and independent researchers use microarrays that are more so distinguished to classify Eurasian and European diversity. And they're not necessarily specific to African genetic diversity, which is why a lot of researchers would prefer whole genome sequencing than 1040 or other different methodologies that are not as holistic with respect to getting all of the different SNPs, that we see in Africa. So you're going to see bias in the direction of Eurasians away from Africans in all different genetic studies. But with that said, there's a certain ethical dilemma that we should discuss in the sense of not necessarily hinging on that when it comes to who we identify as us. Because you've heard the adage, a lot of skin folk ain't kinfolk. And there's a lot of different people who, even though they may have more of a genetic affinity with us, they're not necessarily us. And that's going away from genetics, away from biology, and more into politics and the political reality, which is why I brought up the UNIA ACL in that light. So I would say that from an ethical standpoint, that's kind of the approach that I would take, while I do submit that, yeah, and I don't know about the Jarawa people, but many of these other groups in Asia and Oceania do have Denisovan, and some of them have Neanderthal affinities, right? And some
Well, let me
Africans
ask you a question. I'm cutting you off. So if you were, because we don't understand, for those who don't understand, that DNA is a timeline. So if you understand what mitochondrial DNA, we all understand that mitochondrial DNA goes to the woman, and we all trace it back to a woman in Africa. So no matter who you test for mitochondrial DNA, it's a signature. So it acts like a timeline. So if you were to look at people from Oceania or people from the Solomon Islands, things like that, when you look at their DNA, right, their closest related ancestor is not the African. There's several groups of people from Asia that would be more closer to them. What I think a lot of people is not understanding how nature works is like, we are a part of nature, right? I try to explain, there are animals and plants that look exactly the same, but there are different species of animal. You can take ants, you can take birds, right? If you read Darwin, The Origin of Species, right, it'll show you some similarities, but there's certain tweaks within that species physically that may make it different due to how they look or their diet, even though they look the same. And that's what I think we're not understanding, that just because something looks the same and exactly identical like us, that's what it is like on the surface level, but that's not what it is like genetically. So all the people from the Jarawa people and the people from Australian Aboriginals, if you look to see who their closest ancestor is, not the continental African. And that is my bone of contention when we have these discussions.
Well, I think we need to distinguish like their ancestral population versus the closest relatives, because I think what you meant to say is their closest genetic relative would
Correct.
be non-Africans, whereas their ancestors did come from Africa,
Correct.
right? And to your point, and that's kind of why I wanted to take the ethical approach, because again, not all skin folk are kinfolk, and when it comes to politics and what we do politically, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. We're talking about how we relate to each other in the real world. We're not necessarily
But Kanji,
talking.
hold on. I understand. I know I'm cutting you off again, but you're absolutely right. But I like I'm not saying you're doing that purposely, but me, I think where people get lost when if we talk about science and genetics, let that be its own topic. Now, when we want to talk about the unification of black melanated people, right?
Mhm.
From a geopolitical standpoint, then yes, I'm all for it. But people from
Mhm.
Papua New Guinea, they saying they black like me. Yes, let's do that. But
Yeah.
let's be clear here of who our closest ancestors are. That's not to ostracize them. This is science. People are putting their feelings and politics into science. It just is what it is. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. And I would just say that the political, like our geopolitical position, we do integrate the sciences, but we want to keep things in context, which is why I think that, Cambone's 10, 100, 1,000 is a really brilliant way of putting it, right? Like how you're closer to your first cousin than you are to your third cousin, right? You share the same grandparent with your first cousin, and you share the same great great grandparent with your third cousin, right? So, yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I do believe that local issues, like you got to get your own house in order before you go to the family reunion, right? So, I think that that's all important, and I don't necessarily have that much of an issue. I know that FBAs like they want to, constrict blackness to America and American slavery. I find blackness in classical Africa, which is something that Reggie told me. We were talking about this yesterday, where he dealt with black being divine, how it is divine in African cultures. You do see it in Pharaonic Africa, and I'm not as familiar with the associations of blackness in these other cultures like the Fijians, Melanesians. I have no idea. But Reggie basically his position was if they didn't deify blackness, then they're not us, right? So I could definitely, agree to that to a degree, right? Now with the Olmecs or the Tutu Shi, there's indisputable evidence, not only from the Tataliko excavations and the Sarah excavations, but the epigraphy, the genomics of the region of that time period, of the different flora and fauna, microfauna, the onomastics. There's indisputable evidence that there was contact by Africans. I think anybody who denies that today is ideologically biased. That's not to say that all of them were us, because if we look at Guadarrama's analysis, they certainly weren't. However, King did bring up the fact that, these quadrangular orbits and the less zygomatic projections, you do see that brachiocephalic or short head morphology among certain African populations, which is definitive. But in terms of what they define us as, the features that they define us as, you definitively see that in Wyszynski's analysis, as well as Guadarrama's analysis of Tataliko that had Olmec migrants, you definitively see that Monument F El Negro phenotype within the skeletal remains, right? So at this point, I mean, with the amount of analysis that I've done, that I will continue to do, I don't think that anybody could deny that there was African contact. I don't know how anybody can deny that.
I mean, I would more again, like I said, Olmec body or remains have not been excavated for DNA analysis to run on. But of course, we have to
Tataliko
go
has
on
Olmec
artifacts.
migrants.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Tataliko, I just mentioned, Guadarrama and Wyszynski analyzed remains of Tataliko, and it showed that they had Black or African affinities. And these were some of the Olmecs. One of the sites is an Olmec site, and another site is believed by most anthropologists, archaeologists, Tataliko to have had migrants from the Epi-Olmec culture. And both of those, the excavations from both of those showed remains with African affinities.
And they go back around the same time period as the Olmec heads when it's dated, when it's with chemical analysis, the dating. So they know. I have to do more research on that, but to see if it's if it is, because that was always my bone of contention for me. But with all, like, so you're talking about the fauna that they have, and I use the same thing that the Sheikh Anta Diop use and Ezekiel Obenga use when we look at the ancient Egyptians, when they say, oh, the ancient Egyptians, yeah, they're not black, but when you look at the wall text and you look at the funerary text, you'll see the king and you see the priest who will have leopard skin. There's no leopards in that region. So they were doing business with the South, and they had a lot of things, a lot of trade, a lot of things that they did. So you're like, okay, these people were obviously in contact. But thank you, brother. I'll do more research when it comes to that. Thank you.
No doubt, no doubt. Appreciate you.
Last but not least, and good back and forth discussion. I'll be curious to hear what Buana has to say to follow, or Sister Cheryl, who's active in the chat. But let's welcome in our brother Bakari. By the way, before Bakari speaks, just want to shout out Bakari too. He checks in on me pretty regularly, see how things are going, and even before my father passed away, he would check in. So I do appreciate him. But Bakari, how are you this week?
I'm good, my brother, and peace to everybody on the panel. But man, and the chat. But that's what brothers supposed to do, man. If I don't check on you and worry about you, what's the purpose of us being on here damn talking for?
Yeah, you don't check on me though. You don't check on me. You don't check on me.
You don't answer your phone. I just called you the other day. I just called you the other day, Buana. I'm at work. I'll call you back. I got your text. See, am I lying? Thank you very much, my brother.
No, you only check on me to give me bad news. You only check on me to make sure I eat for the day.
Okay, I got
Anyways,
you.
get and finish what you're doing.
Well, here's the thing. With me, I'm not going to, I was listening to the discussion. It was a good discussion. I ain't arguing with nobody about no science or nothing like that because I ain't no scientist. But I can say my point of contention of certain things that I hear. I always hear black people arguing and say who's not black, right? And I don't think anyone can say we gonna argue and say these people not black, but then say we gonna be able to come together. That's gonna be kind of hard to do. So we are not the same. And me and Kofi cool, me and Kofi talk, right? So I don't mention conversations that I have with people, but I have to mention this one right now. I remember one time Kofi told me and people from Georgia is not the same because I'm from Mississippi and they're from Georgia.
Nah, I didn't say that. I ain't say that.
Yes, you did. Kofi, yes, you did. So now watch
context
this.
is great, but go ahead. You got the floor. My bad.
Okay. But I'm just saying that. So, but here's the thing. So when we say who's black, you can't say such and such is not black because they didn't go through this experience of black people in the Western world. Then turn around and say the ancient Egyptians are black. They didn't go through the experience of black people in the Western world. We can't have it. We can't have it. We can't have it both. Both ways. These people not black, but these people are. They didn't go through our experience of slavery here, Jim Crow here, and whatever we done went through over here in this part of the world. For me, I believe, I just mean, we constantly argue about who is and who's not, and it keep us from actually coming together, doing something together, because it's going to be hard to say, yeah, all of a sudden I'm going to just start saying, yeah, you know what? Yeah, now we the same and we can work together. Well, we wasn't the same before. You just told me we wasn't the same. So now that you need this, we the same. Now I'm going to be okay over here dealing with people who always saw us, who always understood that we're the same. It's good for people that study science. I'm not telling nobody don't. I just say I don't know much about it. And it's good to study DNA. I just know I'm a novice, maybe. If I'm even, I might not even be a novice. Shit. But that would be something I would be new to. But I do know saying people haven't been through the same experience that we haven't been through. There's a FBA and ADOS mindset saying those people or these people are not black. Or you say that's okay. So tell me what you said about black people in Mississippi and black people in Georgia, Kofi.
I don't remember saying such a crazy. I don't make generalizations, and if I said that, there must have been something specifically I was saying. I remember we were talking about the people I believe in Mississippi and Memphis, and you
Now
were
we were talking
telling me
about
about
Mississippi
how
in Georgia. I remember the conversation, and I'm like, dude, how you gonna say we not the same? We black from the United
I,
States from the
you must have misunderstood me because all black people in America are the same.
so watch
They just live in
so
different regions of the United States.
so now watch this. So let's say you say because every black person in the United States, even during slavery, didn't have the same experience because there was some black people here that was never slaves. So if it's going to be based on experience and what you went through,
Wait. So who are those people that were black that were never slaves?
you think every black person was a slave?
I could give you an example,
Teach me.
and I could give you a quick example. And Francois Rousseau, he was born in 1798, and he immigrated to New Orleans from France in the 1830s to participate in the illegal slave trade. Right? He had children with an enslaved woman, and they had a son named Urson. Right? Urson's great great grandson is a man named Tariq Nasheed. I'll leave you with that.
Yeah, that's one person. I think he was talking about referring to groups of people. I
No,
know there
I'm
were
not saying
individual
I'm
black
not.
people here that
So
were
that's
not
what I
slaves.
said. So that's what I said. So with those, so would I be the same as those people? Because their experience wouldn't be my experience.
No, well,
And
again, you said people meaning plural more than one. So I don't know
yeah, more
groups
than
of
yes,
people.
more than one black person was not enslaved. It was more than one free black person in this country. Come on, man, you know that. You know it was more than one free black person in this country.
Okay, so let's test this. So
No,
where
no.
did what town did all these free black people live in?
I didn't say no. Oh, see what you're doing now. You're trying to move the goalpost.
No,
Because
I'm
my
not. You
point is,
said people.
no.
You said
Oh,
people.
oh,
I'll give
okay,
you the
you're right.
floor, man. We'll talk later, man. We'll talk later.
But what I'm saying is, since we don't have the same experience, they wouldn't be my like. I'm gonna say like a lot of people that went through sharecropping, right, and complain about, and they have every right to complain about sharecropping, right? They couldn't read, write, count, and everything was stolen from them, right? They wouldn't be the same as my family. My dad's side of my family could read, write, count, and acquired 4,000 acres of land. We wouldn't have the same experience. I could go down to Crystal Spring, Mississippi. We had horses and cows and all that shit that was acquired during after slavery and Jim. So the experience wouldn't have been the same. But even though the experience was not the same for my daddy and his family, for other black people, we never saw a difference in black people, is my point. Because even though the experience wasn't the same, it was still a struggle. And when we are trying to say these people are not the same because the experience is not the same, we forget about the struggle that they still had. Because I can still talk about the struggle that my folks had. I can talk about the struggles people trying to take their land. I can talk about all those struggles. So when we look at it, when we are constantly trying to figure out who's not, what we are doing, in my opinion, I think we're dividing ourselves even more than we already are. And we are actually doing the work of people that a lot of black folks call white supremacists. And I don't use the term or phrase white supremacy because I don't call nobody supreme. And I know y'all gonna say it means something else, but I don't use that term for white folk. I don't call nobody supreme. I'm just being honest. But we are doing, when we are dividing ourselves, we are literally doing their work for them. They sit back and watch us do it. That's my take on it. And if I misunderstood something that people said, you can tell me, and I like, okay, my bad, I was wrong.
We
Very
good,
good
brother. Probably we
discussion.
good.
Very good discussion. I don't know because Cheryl and Buana have been pretty quiet for a while now. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts, but this is the last topic for the night. So if you're going to make any extra thoughts, do it now before we get to our shout outs.
Me personally, I am happy. If Amma wanted to go first, whatever. But I am particularly happy because what Kofi has done tonight is he's done it. He pinned down Kamji in referencing in terms of DNA, and Kamji made a distinction between a geopolitical notion of blackness or Africanity or whatever that means, and being in terms of African being on a DNA level. And since he did that, I have to concede because it was a question in my mind whether these people are African people. You know, it was a real question in my mind, and it was answered tonight. And you know, for me, I was wrong, and Kofi was right in terms of the time having an importance in dealing with how you reference this whole DNA issue, and the fact that he just was right on that assumption, what I thought was an assumption. He was right, and I would just leave it with him. You know, he was right, so it is what it is. I'll leave it.
Thank you for that.
Sure, I gave you room there to speak if you wanted to. But if you don't have any last thoughts, man, we could go to shout out. Cheryl, you want to add something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add. You know, I think we just need to stay focused. Okay, when we have things in the Black world that we're focused on, it's okay to reach your hand out and stretch across the world and touch somebody who's been colonized. That's wonderful. Like, there's a lot of people around the world that have been colonized, and you know, that's what we do as African people. We feel for other people, but we have to be focused, because I think we get into these rabbit holes and we start running down and, oh, we this, we that, we did it. Like, and these are the type of conversations that make a Black person who's new to this type of thing confused as hell. Like, because they're the way people on this panel understand things is not the way our people understand things in general. Okay, so when you're saying all this stuff about Pakis and Indians and Asians, our people look at it from their perspective. I know it's hard to see things from other people's perspectives. Trust me, I understand that. Like, I have to learn that. But other people, especially younger people and people who are all into, you know, they're all over the place. We got Christians, we got to deal with, we got Muslim Black people, we got Black people that think the 12 tribes of Israel. We got all types of confusion, and that's why when we jump in all over the place like this, it becomes confusing for the audience. And that's why I think we need to kind of bring it back. Like, we need to reel it back a little bit, because we're not organized enough to be reaching out to all of these Black Pakis and these Black Indians and these black everything, black Asians and all of this stuff. Because, like, we're not that organized. We're not even a percentage of that organized to even do that right now. We need to focus on what we got right here in the African world. And then once we get that settled, then you can go out and spread your joy and spread your whatever. But we need to focus. We lose focus so easy. I just want us to reel it back. Just reel it back a little bit.
Appreciate that, Sister Cheryl. Before anyone leaves the panel, man, let me get your shout outs for this week. RBG, Real Black Gentleman, asked if there were traces of American specimens found in Africa. I think Kamji addressed that with I think it was corn. Was it corn or cotton?
Yeah. Z-maize.
Maize, yeah. That's found in Cape Verde via West Africa.
No, that was Cotton.
Yeah.
Cotton was good.
So
That was Gossip PM Hirsutum.
okay, so corn is found where on the continent? From where?
Corn is found in Ile Ife, in Ile Ife pottery sherds, and
Right.
cotton Gossypium hirsutum from Mexico is found in Cape Verde, and you also have Gossypium gossypoides in Mexico, which has an African ancestry as well.
All right. So hopefully that answers RBG's question. But without further ado, man, shout outs for this week. Amigos, go right just straight down the line. Brother Bakari, what would you like to shout out this week?
First, I want to shout you out for being able to come on here and host a podcast, you know, with what you're going through. And shout out to you also for holding it, you know, together, you, your sons, and everything, you know. So you are who and what I'm shouting out this week. Koku is and shout out to Kofi and Camji verse. Bawana. Cheryl, that's her name. I always say her name wrong. And everybody in the chat. That's my shout out.
Appreciate that, bro. Appreciate that, Brother Bakari. I don't know why Kamji dipped, but Kofi, what would you like to shout out this week?
Yeah, I'm gonna pretty much piggyback on what Brother Bakari says. Like, you having the strength and courage to to do a podcast in light of what's happening. My mother passed about 5 years ago. It feels like yesterday, so it's hard. And I just pray with the ancestors just be with you and just be able to give you strength. I also want to shout out to the panel, obviously, Kamji first for gracing us with his presence, and shout out to the Haitians that are here that Trump is trying to deport. Right? Shout out to the Somalis, that the ones that realize that they're now niggas, even the ones that voted for him. Even shout out to them. So that's who I want to pretty much shout out now, and to just the black world, and also shout out to Professor James Smalls for trying to put that olive branch out to FBA, and they pretty much slapped it out his hand. So right now, FBA is doomed. There's 100% a bunch of sycophants, and so just shout out to all the real black people that look as blackness and unity as your mental state, not where you came from. So that's about it.
Appreciate that, Kofi. Thanks for the shout out from you and Bakari. Kamji is back. Kamji, what would you like to shout out this week?
Yeah, man, I didn't even know that you had lost your father. Condolences to that. He's definitely with the ancestors, and I could tell that he raised a strong son. Just for you to be able to put on this platform and allow this back and forth that could even get contentious sometimes. So I feel honored that to be able to share this space with you during this time. And I just want to give a shout out to, the fecal brain assimilationists as always, because they're losing, as Kofi just brilliantly put, one of their only legitimate scholars, living scholars in James Smalls. So the fecal brain assimilationists are reeling, and they're going to have to figure that out. Hopefully the Alphabet Boys and the Central Intelligence Agency give them a new script. So shout out to them. I want to give a shout out to, all of the black folks around the world who are interested in intelligent conversations and interested in black liberation. Shout out to y'all. Shout out to all the brothers and sisters on this panel. Appreciate y'all for letting me say my piece tonight. Peace.
Yes, sir. With that said, Sister Cheryl, would you like to shout out this week?
Oh man, there's a lot. Oh, can't think of anything specific. No, there's a lot of things. um, I don't know. I'll just say shout out to you, Koku, for trying to, mediate this thing here. Shout out.
I appreciate that, Sister Cheryl. Last but not least, man, Buana, what would you like to shout out this week?
Yeah. So first, let me start like this. Shout out to Black Thought and the Black thinkers. And I understand Shirley's position. Sometimes you have to dumb it down for the masses, but there must also be a space where Black thinkers could convene and have discussions above the fray. I live in a country where the most intellectual discussion people have is talking about the game or collect and crack conquer and how to make that. So I really appreciate sometimes these academic dialogues because we must have a place to climb up to rather than living, on baseline all the time. So if the Black thinkers come together and able to have sometimes, not always, sophisticated conversations, we must have to arrive to the challenge of listening to what they have to say, and even trying to put ourselves in a room with the thinkers, because that's the only way you could learn and get better. You can't always be in rooms with people who think just like you. Sometimes you have to find yourself in rooms where you're challenged. So shout out to this room for trying to attempt to do that. Between Kofi and Kamji, that discussion for me was quintessential. That was a very, very great discussion that they had, and I really appreciated that because you usually don't have them. So shout out to them brothers for engaging like that. Shout out for Brother Bakari. Brother Bakari is a glue. Brother Bakari is the glue that he always been saying a long time ago. How we gonna get together? Let's get together. He is a little bit older than us, so he understands the importance of doing that, and that can't be wasted. The brothers who see further, and he understands the importance of getting together. And I ain't gonna be dismissive of that, but sometimes Brother Bakari call me early in the morning. I gotta do a business, bro. But needless to say, I appreciate his calls in Kofi and Koku and checking in on me as well. That's very important, and I don't get past me, brother, and I appreciate you for doing that. Finally, and shout out to Amma as well. Finally, let me say this. When my father died, when my father died, I came to the realization that I was now in the driver's seat. I was the quintessential man now. When my father passed, and I still having a difficult time dealing with that because my father was such a presence. But sometimes, not always, sometimes when these things happen, you have to put your shoes into the person who's been in the driver's seat for such a long time. And sometimes that could be very difficult wearing those shoes. But I personally believe that your father would be very proud of you for delivering this message and what you're trying to do in trying to bring people together. Your pops raised a smart intellectual brother to push on whatever he had inside him. He give it to you, pass on to you, and it's for you to pass it on to your children as well. So I personally think that you have the ability to wear those shoes and go forward in this world and do great things. So, like I say again to you, Koku, condolences, brother. But I think that you will make your father proud in your efforts to push forward the progress of Black people on this planet. So much respect to you, and I'll see you next week. Peace out.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for the shout outs and the condolences. A shout out to my dad. That's my shout out this week. We had a complicated relationship, but I'm thankful for him. My father was a Gaviite, and that's how I came to know and to do my own exploration of Gavi and Gaviism. So I appreciate him for that above all else. And yeah, we'll lay him to rest next Saturday, so we won't be live next Saturday. I'll be back home for that. But the week after, I hope to have the strength to come back and do this again. Some of you would have pointed out, they say bury the man and continue to plan. So once I get through it, we got work to do, man. And we'll talk more about that in the future. That's the show for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I hope we'll be back in 2 weeks to continue these discussions and hopefully to start talking about in the real world. But Brother Bakari, I want to point out, and I pointed out earlier, but we're doing that thing, that Gaviite thing of reaching out to people and checking up and checking in. So we got to continue that type of thing as we go forward, man. But in the meantime, you guys be good. I'll see y'all next time. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.